You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Do you remember?
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 4-pack of Magnum Classic ice creams, now half price, from £3.20 to just £1.60, all this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The equity market is extending record highs right now, with the Dow up about 0.5%, being led higher by J.P. Morgan. Those shares higher by 2% after J.P. Morgan among the banks today that reported earnings much above forecast. On that list as well, Citigroup shares in Citi right now better by 2.8%. Wells Fargo, though, delivered earnings that disappointed, and its shares right now are trading off by about 4%. Dow Industrial Average, 29,044, so we're above 29 grand for the first time. In the broader market, the S&P 500 with a gain of 0.2%, similar gain for the NASDAQ Composite. We've got long-term interest rates a bit lower today after a measure of underlying retail inflation was up less than forecast. Talking here about the core CPI reading, it obviously excludes volatile food and energy prices. It was up last month just 0.1%. Much of the deceleration was credited to shelter cost on the decline. A 10-year Treasury yielding 182 right now. Dollar steady against the majors, and a little more strength in the offshore Chinese yuan after an overnight surge. That occurred after the U.S. lifted the designation of China as a currency manipulator. The yuan right now offshore at 687.94 against the greenback for a gain of about 0.1%. I'm Doug Krisner. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much to Doug Krisner. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Martin O'Malley served as governor of Maryland for 8 years after spending 8 years as mayor of Baltimore. He has now written a new book, Smarter Government, How to Govern for Results in an Information Age. And we welcome him now to Bloomberg. Governor, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be back in this building.
So I've looked through your book. I read the book. It's fascinating. Tell me why you wrote it.
I wrote it because our democracy is in crisis, not just here in the United States, but the world over. There is a sinking sense among those of us who are self-governing people that somehow our problems have become bigger than our ability to solve them. So I wrote this book as a kind of clarion call, really, to a new generation of Americans these young people that I've seen in city halls all over the country, certainly that I saw here in New York under Mayor Bloomberg's administration, who are taking the new technologies of GIS, Geographic Information Systems, the Internet of Things, and using those to better model, measure, and map dynamic shifting problems so that we can get inside of their turning radius, whether it's climate change, improving public safety, improving test scores of kids all across a city or a state. These are the things that make a republic worth having and defending. And so I'm, notwithstanding the dark times on our national horizon, I believe that there is rising up from smart cities around the world a new way of governing. And I was lucky enough to have been in the curl of that wave as a mayor myself and also as a governor.
And for those in our audience who haven't had the opportunity to read the book, I don't take it as being a particularly partisan book at all. I don't take it as left or right. I mean, you happen to be a Democrat, but that doesn't come through in the book. It is more, I thought, a call for pragmatism. And as you say, data. Use of data. Big data is all the rage right now. How can you use that as a mayor, as a governor?
Yeah, there's a very interesting shift that's taken place, and we've hardly even noticed it. But more recently elected mayors tend to use not the word constituent, which almost has a top-down connotation to it. But they use the word customer. Yeah. So there has been this bit of a revolution in thinking and the embracing of what you just described, which was, it's not about left or right, it's about whether it works or whether it doesn't work. And you all were pioneers in this in New York City with policing. Yeah. Which also went very, nationwide.
Before Bloomberg, actually. The Comstat goes before that.
Comstat. I was on the city council in Baltimore watching my city become more and more violent, and I would ask, why can't we learn from what they're doing with Comstat in New York? Fast forward, I was elected mayor of Baltimore in 1999. We took that approach enterprise-wide, called it CityStat, CITISTAT. If you were to Google that, you'll find it popping up all over the world. But it is that entrepreneurial approach of having the data, having the map, and being able to tell whether what we're doing is working or not. That's a fundamental shift in our politics, but I would argue that it is how mayors have always been inclined to govern. Because all of your ideology in the world isn't going to make my street cleaner. Mm-hmm. Either the street's cleaner, either my neighborhood's safer, or it's not. So mayors deliver very visible things, and they've never had that kind of remoteness from citizens that governors and presidents sometimes have.
How did it work in Baltimore? Because I just actually called up statistics, deaths per 100,000 for Baltimore here. And it's interesting, during your time as mayor, they did not go down very much. It was after you got to be governor. Is there a lag as a practical matter? Does it take a while for it to really come into effect?
Yeah, our very first year, we drove homicides down below 300 for the first time in 20 years. They reached their lowest point in our city. We drove it down to its lowest point, you're right, 3 years after I left. Yeah. But during those 10 years, from 2000 to 2009, Baltimore achieved the biggest reduction in Part 1 crime, combined property and violence, of any major city in America. Sadly, a couple of mayors after I left, the mayor got bored with pushing that rock up the hill.
Well, that was going to be my question, because it's shot back up now. And is it because they stopped doing that? What happened?
They stopped doing the things that were working. Most importantly being to police the police. Sustained gains in public safety, especially in a nation like ours, where law enforcement has been intertwined with racial injustice since our founding. The only way to sustain those gains is with honesty and integrity when it comes to policing the police, supervising your police, when necessary, disciplining the police. Things like reverse integrity stings, civilian review board, owning those failures when they happen.
Also, one of the things I've heard from a former big city mayor is you have to make sure the police go to where the crime is. Because if you leave them to their own device, as Winnie is, I'm not going to go to the dangerous places. You actually have to make them go where most of the crime is happening. Is that true?
Yes, it's certainly true. And a lot of cities have actually gotten very good at this. I think probably the Los Angeles Police Department is one of the more advanced in terms of understanding the where and when crime has happened for the last 10 years and then deploying in advance of it. And in fact, that's one example of this movement, not only in policing, but in smart cities. We used to pride ourselves on being able to being able to respond quickly to calls for service. But increasingly, cities, led by their police departments, are deploying instead with predictive analytics or a system of alerts based on when and where it happened before, so that we can anticipate problems before they happen and not be chasing after them when they've already happened.
We're speaking with former Governor O'Malley of Maryland, who is author of the book Smarter Government, How to Govern for Results in the Information Age. He's going to be staying with us so we can talk a little bit about the 2020 presidential race and the debate out in Iowa tonight. That's coming up. We are on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are posting record gains as investors eye the start of earnings season and officials prepare to sign phase 1 of the U.S.-China trade deal tomorrow. In earnings, J.P. Morgan Chase was more profitable last year than any bank has been in the history of the U.S., but Wells Fargo reported $1.5 billion in expenses for litigation in the fourth quarter as the lender worked through its legal woes. And Boeing lost its title as the world's largest plane maker to Airbus because of the grounding of the 737 MAX. Boeing sold 380 jets last year. That's less than half of Airbus's tally of 863 airplanes. Here's a data check. The Dow is up 140 points to 29,046. S&P 500 up 3 points. The Nasdaq up 9. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscription.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! Along the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show. American football, British accent. Add to your favourites and listen on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, the 2020 presidential contest and what we should be looking for in tonight's debate with the former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley. But first, let's get a market check with Doug Krisner.
David, shares in Boeing right now picking up about 1.3%. We're hearing that Boeing is talking to a group of banks about a potential loan. Boeing has been dealing, as you well know, with a production halt of the grounded 737 MAX jetliners. We are told Citigroup is leading discussions between Boeing and a small group of banks. Now, this news comes as the grounding of the 737 really has meant that Boeing is no longer the world's largest plane maker. The crown now belongs to Airbus. Last year, Boeing delivered 380 jetliners. That was less than half of the total for Airbus. In the equity market today, we've got record highs for the major benchmarks. Earnings season, I should say, is now underway. The big banks reported earlier. JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup beat. Wells Fargo, though, disappointed. And tomorrow, of course, it's the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China. Dow right now ahead by 0.5%. S&P 500 better by about 0.2%. And the NASDAQ Composite ahead by nearly 0.3%. We had some soft core CPI data earlier, and that's allowed long-term interest rates to drop just a bit. 10-year Treasury now with a yield of 1.82%. Balance of Power brought to you by SEI. Built on an advanced technology and 50 years of innovation, SEI offers asset managers a comprehensive and flexible operating outsourcing platform. For more, you can go to SEIC.com. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Doug Krisner.
Thank you so much, Doug Krisner. Polls indicate a close four-way race in Iowa with 20 days to go until the caucus is there. And one of the frontrunners, former Vice President Joe Biden, says people are just now starting to make up their minds.
People are beginning to make up their minds now, and this is a critical moment. All the polling data that I've read and seen is all, it's a toss-up.
Still with us is Maryland's former governor, Martin O'Malley. So, Governor, you've done this. You've run for mayor, run for governor, and for that matter, for president as well. Do people make up their mind just at the last minute?
In Iowa, that's especially true. What Vice President Biden says resonates with my experience, both as a staff person there for Gary Hart as a very young man and for other people and then myself. People in Iowa want to have a chance to look at everybody and hear everybody, usually a couple or three times. And then in these last few weeks, that's when that Rubik's Cube of community relationships and who's for whom starts to twist and turn, and people make up their collective mind. So, yeah, this is a critically important time. So Vice President's right about that.
And we've got a debate coming up tonight, right. Of course. A lot of people are watching that closely. What would you look for in that debate? I mean, as a Democrat, as somebody who has been a candidate, what would you like to hear? What perhaps haven't you heard addressed so far that should be addressed?
Yeah, my sense, and I've continued to travel around the country, and I was in probably 30 states in the midterms. So there's a tremendous fear all across our country, and it's particularly acute across a lot of formerly robust industrial states that have gone through, the greatest amount of pain lately as we move from the second industrial revolution into the third, a time of enormous change in terms of the energy we used before, the renewable energy we'll have to use, the skills that were in demand before, the skills that are going to be in demand right now. Against that dark backdrop of fear, what I believe people are tuning into tonight is to hear one of these candidates articulate the story of the future, an American story in keeping with the greatness of our people, of a fearless American future where we say, yes, climate change is the greatest business opportunity to come to the United States in 100 years. And we can seize this opportunity. The markets are moving there. I mean, you guys know at Bloomberg, the amount that's being invested in new energy is is overwhelmingly into renewable energy right now. So look, I think what people are listening for tonight is that story. None of them has yet really pierced through with that in any of these debates, which can get downright silly. It's like they're all trying to one-up each other on who's more woke, and the journalists asking the questions are trying to shake them up like ants in a jar, and then they try to cut off microphones of anybody that has experience but isn't agitating. And you know what else I've heard around the country? I don't know if I'm allowed to say this here, but I hear a lot of people saying they'd like to hear Mike Bloomberg. And they want to hear more from Mike Bloomberg. So I think this is a very fluid race, and people are searching for a leader that actually has that story of a winning American future.
Has politics changed itself? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Morning in America when Ronald Reagan ran way back in 1980. I was reasonably young, but it was a story of optimism, of what we could be. Remember that commercial came out? It was a wonderful commercial. Has that changed? Because President Trump talks about making America great again, but I think it's fair to say that he motivates people in part by anger. We're angry at various people who are keeping us from being great again. Is there a role in American politics today, with social media and everything else, for somebody to come up with an optimistic measure and say, here's a vision we can move toward?
Yeah, I kind of look at the last presidential election with Donald Trump's victory as a bit of a default. In the absence of a credible story about how we can create a better future for our kids in a time of rapid global change and challenge, people defaulted to the strong man that will build a wall, raise the drawbridge, keep your piece of whatever it is you have, because you and I know it's declining and it will ever be declining. So I don't think human nature has changed. Certainly the communications around politics have. Social media and the other segmentation, allows us all to kind of pull away from one another and polarize. However, I think there's a tremendous opportunity right now to give voice to that story of a fearless American future. We can create more jobs by reversing climate change than we ever will by trying to dig in our heels and hold on to coal jobs. That's one piece of it, but it's an important piece of it. The larger point, though, David, is that people are straining to hear a leader articulate a story for rebuilding not only our country, but restoring our faith in that American notion that we can give our kids a better future. Absent that, you might see record low unemployment, but you're seeing record high white male suicides. So the future is always a story. People are listening for that story tonight.
Really important point. I want to interrupt our train of thought now because there's breaking news that just crossed the Bloomberg right now. And the report is that existing tariffs on billions of dollars of Chinese goods coming to the United States are likely to stay in place until after the American presidential election. Reportedly, the two sides have an understanding that no sooner than 10 months after the signing of the agreement, which is supposed to happen tomorrow at the White House, the U.S. is going to review progress and potentially trim tariffs now in place on $360 billion of imports. So perhaps, Governor, some good news, because one of the issues has been what they were talking about is just rolling back a very small portion of the tariffs. If they're really talking about potentially affecting all $360 billion of imports, maybe that's good news. But interestingly, I think you can't separate it from politics if really they're putting it off until after the election.
No, and it's these sorts of, we haven't, you had a great guest on earlier, and Fred certainly knows, very knowledgeable in terms of trade. Another place where we have no story other than that we lose. Heads you lose, tails we lose. So I hope this settles down. I hope this is good news. I think America can win in a more global economy and engaged, so long as we act in alignment with our principles in terms of treating, in terms of respecting the dignity of workers and also the importance of the other living systems of this planet. So let's hope it's good news, but you can't really blame people, can you, David, for being cynical when they say that the tariffs will come off after the next presidential election?
That's right, but I want to use China to come back to the point you were making earlier, because China certainly has put a big marker down on sustainability. Perhaps they need to, given the situation they have with their air and their water, but that they're really investing in sustainable energy to a degree the United States, as a government at least, is certainly not.
It's a critical partnership in order for us to not only, it's not enough to cap emissions, as you know. We have to get to a point point where we're actually drawing more carbon down out of the atmosphere than we pump into it every day. And the strategic alliance that can make that happen could well be China and the United States, under different leadership, of course. In the meantime, cities and states have to carry the ball on those commitments. But one could see, given the huge amount of just how large China is, and also how quickly they can deploy. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want their economic system. Right. I'm a capitalist, and there's much I find objectionable about their political system. However, when it comes to the rapid deployment of new technologies to get us to 100% renewable energy on this planet, I think the Chinese actually are part of that solution, along with American leadership. And that of others.
We heard from the private sector today in the form of BlackRock and Larry Fink talking about a new sustainable fund.
Yeah, how
they're going to
that?
really shift their investment, a substantial amount of investment. That's the private sector. Take us to the public sector, not the federal government, but the state government, the local government. What can local and state government do on sustainability?
There are many things. In fact, all of the commitments that the United States made under the Paris Accords could be met by cities and states and the power they have.
Is that a fact?
That is a fact, but they have to do it. Hoping it so doesn't make it so. But all across the country, you've seen more and more mayors declare their commitment to carbon neutrality. You have seen them taking actions. I believe that in the city of Houston, I think read an article that said 89% of their energy for the corporation, that is the city of Houston, comes from renewable sources. Hawaii has a 100% target that they are pursuing. So all of the levers for energy regulation and determining what sort of energy it shall be actually resides at the states. Now, yes, the federal government could play a role in terms of transmission lines, but in terms of renewable portfolio standards, green building codes, microgrids, all of these are things, fee and tariffs, all of these are things that states can do, and many, in fact, are, and making tremendous progress.
Okay, really appreciate you being here, Governor. It's been a great pleasure. Covered a lot of territory. That is former Governor Martin O'Malley of Maryland. He's the author of the new book, Smarter Government, How to Govern for Results in the Information Age. And now we go to Doug Krisner for a Business Flash.
Well, David, as you know, tomorrow the U.S. and China are set to sign the Phase 1 trade deal. Now we are hearing the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the U.S. election, despite that Phase 1 agreement. We are told any move to reduce these tariffs will hinge on Beijing's compliance with terms of the Phase 1 accord. Now, the two sides have an understanding, we are told, that no sooner than 10 months after the signing of the Phase 1 deal, the U.S. will review progress and potentially trim tariffs now in place on about $360 billion worth of goods from China. The equity market remains elevated, slightly off the best level of the day, with the Dow extending a record by 0.2%. I stand corrected because as I speak, the S&P 500 has turned negative by 0.1%. Same story is true for the NASDAQ Composite, down less than 0.1%. Long-term interest rates a bit lower. That's after a core measure of consumer prices rose less than forecast. CPI, this is core CPI in December, up just 0.1%. U.S. 10-year Treasury right now yielding 1.81%. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much, Doug Krisner. This is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and we're going to go to that breaking story about Chinese tariffs. And we have joined by our senior trade reporter, Sean Donnan, in Washington. Sean, thank goodness you're there, because I see the piece on the Bloomberg. I want you to explain to me exactly what we think is going to happen. As I understand it, they're going to keep a lot of the tariffs on, and at least for 10 months until after the election?
That's absolutely right. And that gets at really one of the big questions that was hanging around about this deal, which is what happens to the tariffs next. We know that before Christmas, when this deal was announced, the U.S. committed to not going ahead with a tranche of tariffs that was going to take effect December 15th. Those were the tariffs that were going to hit your iPhone, your laptop computer, your kids' toys, and so on, and potentially ruin Christmas. They also committed in that deal to reduce the rate on a tranche of tariffs that took effect in September from 15% to $7.5 billion. But there's still a lot of tariffs that remain in effect. Some $360 billion in products from China are now subject to a 25% tariff on 250 billion of them, or it's 7.5 on a further 110 billion. It gets confusing. And the big question with this deal, and the Chinese had really been hoping that this deal would presage some further reductions in tariffs. What we now know is that both sides have agreed, and this is something that is fairly politically convenient for Donald Trump as he runs for re-election, that both sides have committed that they will not, that there will be no further reduction in U.S. tariffs until 10 months after this deal is signed. That is tomorrow that it is due to be signed. That takes us to mid-November, and therefore after the presidential election.
So I want to make sure I have this absolutely clear. The new tariffs that were going to go into place in September still will not go into place. And
Absolutely,
the rollback on the 15 to the 7.5% of the ones from September still will roll back. Now we're talking about what's left after that.
Absolutely.
And they have picked 10 months, not 12 months, 10 months, which just happens to take you pretty much up to the election.
Yeah, and that helps Donald Trump potentially politically, because one of the things that he is running on is his trade policy. He has called himself Tariff Man. This is a timetable that allows him to take the idea that he has been tough on China into the election, which plays well with his core base, and it kind of removes, in some ways, this line of attack potentially for Democrats. And we have already heard some criticism from Chuck Schumer, for example, on this, that this deal is Trump somehow getting weak with China.
So the thing that I would love to know, I'm sure everyone would love to know, it's probably not knowable, is what will determine whether they get rolled back, the additional ones get rolled back? Is it simply they complied with what they agreed to tomorrow when they have the signing, or is it contingent on some form of phase 2 that goes over and above what they're getting tomorrow?
Well, that's a really good question. The first part of that we know is right. We know that the U.S. is very keen that China not do what it has done with past administration, that is break its commitments, and that therefore they have a very specific timetable of purchases and of potentially legal changes in China that they want to see as part of this deal. The second part is less clear. What happens next? As you know, phase 1 does not include some big topics like industrial subsidies, which really are at the core of China Inc. and its ability to compete internationally. The president and Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, have said that those will be addressed in phase 2 of a negotiation. The president has also said that that negotiation may not conclude until after the election. But yes, clearly the U.S. is going to want to see some kind of progress on phase 2.
This entire negotiation, at least one way to look at it, is between two very strong, powerful leaders who like to be seen as strong. That is President Xi and President Trump. If this report is correct, and I'm sure it is, it's on the Bloomberg, does this sort of constitute a win-win? Because on the one hand, President Xi can say, look at what I got. I got an agreement not just on the December and the cutback of the September tariffs, but I got sort of a promise that they're going to take a look at the whole thing. On the other hand, President Donald Trump says, I've really got sort of Damocles over their head. They've got to behave themselves.
Absolutely. This is the art of the trade deal.
There you have it. And when will we know for sure? Is this going to be in the 86-page document that I think we're going to get to see tomorrow finally, right?
So the administration has said they will release the 86-page text of this deal tomorrow, at least the English language version of it. What we are told is that this timetable is not specified in the agreement. It is, in fact, an informal agreement between negotiators. And as one of our sources pointed out, that is still subject to the whims of President Donald Trump.
A lot of important stuff gets done in those side agreements. Okay, thank you so much to Sean Donnan. He's our senior trade reporter from Washington. We're going to turn now from trade to impeachment. The House of Representatives is due to vote tomorrow on the House managers for the trial in the Senate, and at long last to send the articles of impeachment over to the Senate. Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School is a nationally recognized authority on constitutional law. He actually wrote the book. That is the influential treatise, American Constitutional Law, and we welcome him now back to Bloomberg. So, Professor Tribe, thank you for being with us. Give us a sense. We understand the Constitution itself does not specify much about the procedure by which an impeachment should be conducted. Are there any other rules, statutes, regulations that might constrain what the Senate can do?
Well, the Constitution is specific about the fact that the Chief Justice presides when the President is put on trial after being impeached by the House. And it also specifies that in any impeachment trial, every senator must be on oath or affirmation. That's a separate oath from the oath that the senators take, like any other government official, when they assume their posts. And ever since the trial of Andrew Johnson, the Senate rules, the standing rules, have specified, starting 1886 actually, in a phrase that hasn't been changed since, that every senator must take an oath to do impartial justice.
Well, it's interesting.
Beyond that, the rest is silence. There are rules, but they can be changed by a majority of the Senate.
Well, the pressing issue, I think, right at the moment is whether witnesses would be called, in particular those 4 witnesses that the Democrats didn't get to talk to, such as, for example, Mr. John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor, who has now said he will appear if he's subpoenaed. Implicit in the impartial justice, is there something about whether we should call witnesses that would be germane, but we haven't heard from?
Well, I think it's quite clear that impartial justice means justice based on facts, based not on some pre-commitment to come out one way or the other. And that means that a trial without witnesses is a trial in name only. It's like a bicycle without wheels. And it seems to me that when senators take the oath, they really can't promise to have no presuppositions. Framers were not impractical. They knew that senators would be politicians, but they can promise and have to promise that they will be open to at least potentially changing their minds. And that means open to hearing the evidence. Nobody who has promised under oath to do impartial justice can then turn around and say, but I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear the witnesses that the president blocked from appearing before the House. It's just not possible to take those two positions at once.
The Senate, to the best of my knowledge, has not set out yet what its regulations or rules will be for conducting this proceeding, trial, whatever we want to call it. But as I understand it, it's reported that the majority leader is saying, well, we'll take up the question of whether we actually call witness after we start the proceeding. We'll have a vote on that. If, in fact, there is a vote, does it make sense what the Republicans are saying, that if you want to call witnesses for one side, we should get to call them for the other side, following the logic that you've laid out?
There's no question that both sides should have a right to call witnesses as long as they're relevant. And in the first instance, the Chief Justice would rule on whether they're relevant, and he could be, in the case of a contested case, he could be overturned by a majority of the Senate. But since there are 100 members in the Senate, and if there's a 50-50 tie, the tie-breaking role would go not to the vice president, who has nothing to do with a Senate trial of a sitting president, but to the Chief Justice himself, so that he might be more than a potted plant here. He really might cast the decisive vote. And I think I misspoke earlier when I said that a majority could change the rules. The basic rules, whatever they happen to be, and they were established for the basic nature of an impeachment trial back in 1886, can only be changed by a 2/3 vote. So that if, for example, the rules were suddenly to be changed to permit dismissing the entire case without really hearing anything from either side, that would take 67 senators. And the attempt to do that, which McConnell has said he would try to do, I think is bound to fail. So I don't think he's even going to try, because he doesn't have the 67 votes it would take to turn this into a complete rubber stamp.
Professor Tribe, to talk more broadly about the role of impeachment under our Constitution and in our republic, we went for an awful long time and had essentially one impeachment of Andrew Johnson back after the Civil War. Now we have 3, if not impeachments. Richard Nixon wasn't actually impeached, but he quit before he was, in a fairly short order. Does that tell us something about what's going on with our basic functioning of government, that we're having to resort to impeachment of the president this often?
Well, I don't think we had to resort to it in the Clinton case. I think that was sort of a one-off. It was based on lying about sex, and I don't think that would today lead to a House vote to impeach. The Nixon case was unusual, to be sure, because we haven't had many presidents who basically say that they are the law. We had a president like that under Richard Nixon, and he resigned rather than being impeached. We have a president like that with Donald Trump, and he has been impeached. As the Speaker of the House said, he will remain impeached forever, whatever the Senate may do. But I wouldn't make too much of the fact that 2 of the 3 impeachments occurred in 1886 and then in 1974, and now sooner than that gap from 1886 to 74. We have another one in 2019. You know, when you have a sample of just a very few points, scatter diagram, as scientists might say, is rather hard to draw a curve through. So I wouldn't assume that we are now bound to have impeachments every other year.
Okay, thank you very much. It's always great to have you with us. That's Professor Lawrence Tribe. He's the Carl M. Loeb University Professor at Harvard Law School. And now it's time to look forward to Bloomberg Business Week. We have Jason Kelly here to tell us what is coming up.
I love when you bounce from like the likes of Lawrence Tribe to me. Yeah. You know, it's just like just a couple guys talking about the news.
Too, haven't you?
Yeah, no textbooks. No textbooks. Anyway, so coming up on Bloomberg Business Week, a fascinating day in the markets owing to politics and trade, as I'm sure you've been talking about. So we'll get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about Tesla. You don't have a Tesla, do you?
No, but I have to say I've been against them. I'm tempted now.
The stock is now above $500. I know. It's unbelievable.
Well, helped in part by China.
Yes. Yes.
China's saying, we really believe in this. We're going to keep the subsidies going.
Yeah, so that was a seminal moment. We're going to get into that story. We're going to preview the Democratic debate with Kevin Cirilli. Yeah. And we're going to talk a little healthcare with the CEO of Hackensack Meridian Health. So obviously healthcare, I know, top of mind in the political realm.
Well, exactly. It will be on the debate stage, I'm sure, tonight without a doubt. Okay, that's all coming up on Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly. That's going to do it for today for Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sale is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sale. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Along the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
The move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
And live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, also streaming on YouTube. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is
Tuesday, January 14, 2020. I'm Carol Massar along with my co-host Jason Kelly.
A lot of records going on until they weren't. Trade headlines, and you said it yesterday. The deal's not done till it's done, and it's never linear, is it?
I said it feels like a tortured move towards that trade agreement. All right, we're going to get into that, talk about the markets, talk about bank earnings. First up, though, we got to talk about your big top stories on this Tuesday. Here is Doug Krisner.
Let's begin with the trade issue because we are hearing that the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods are going to stay in place until after the U.S. election, despite this Phase 1 trade agreement that's expected to be signed tomorrow. We are told any move to reduce these tariffs will hinge on Beijing's compliance with the terms of the Phase 1 accord. So, as Jason and Carol alluded to, this has helped to take the equity market off session highs. Technically, the Dow is still holding on to a slim record here with a gain of about 0.2%, largely because of the earnings from J.P. Morgan Chase, which were above estimates. J.P. Morgan Chase shares right now better by about 1.5%. The numbers, though, from Wells Fargo were disappointing. That stock is down about 4.8% right now. Citigroup's numbers beat, and those shares higher by about 2.5%. Also seeing strength in shares of Boeing stock is up about 1% right now. We are hearing that Boeing is talking to a group of banks about a potential loan. The company has been dealing with a production halt of the 737 MAX jetliner, which of course has been grounded. We are told Citigroup is leading these discussions between Boeing and a small group of banks. So the Dow with the gain of about 0.2%. S&P 500, though, down about 0.1%. NASDAQ composite weaker by about 0.2%. In the bond market, long-term interest rates coming in ever so slightly. 10 years down about 3 basis points to 181, with a bit of risk off that we're seeing in the equity market. Also, the reading on core CPI was very soft, up just 0.1% in December. I'm Doug Krisner. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Massar also streaming live on YouTube. And Boeing, Carol, grabbing a lot of headlines. The stock up now about 0.5%. It was up as much as 1.5%. A lot going on there at that airplane maker.
There's a lot of stories among your most read. We're going to dig into them, including a bonus for the CEO. He doesn't need it, so we'll explain that one. Big banks out with earnings, of course, our top story. Earnings off and running until they weren't because of that trade headline, because that really dragged down the markets. Talk about that. Then we're going to talk healthcare because we've got the Hackensack Meridian Health CEO stopping by. So much to talk to with him.
Well, and especially timely because we're looking forward to tonight the Democrats getting together. Healthcare has taken up so much of the oxygen on the debate stage so far this year. Can't think tonight is going to be different. So we're going to put a lot of questions to him about what's actually feasible as we look ahead.
All right. First up, Business Week Agenda. Joe Weisenthal, markets editor at Bloomberg News, co-host of What'd You Miss, coming your way on Bloomberg TV at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. He's in our Interactive Brokers studio along with Dave Wilson, stocks editor at Bloomberg News. Dave, we were in the newsroom. We saw the trade headline. Doug just broke it down. Jason and I were watching it. As soon as that trade headline came down, you just saw stocks drop.
Yeah, you did, but let's keep in mind
perspective. I know.
Yeah, absolutely. With that going on, with the first real day of fourth quarter earnings going on, 3 of the 4 largest banks reporting, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, you figured there'd be some excitement and some direction in stocks, and there really hasn't been. You look at the S&P 500's trading range on the day, it's less than 0.5 percentage point. Sure, we've come down, hit almost the lows of the day in response to, the extension of tariffs in that trade headline.
But even when it was up at its high, it was up 6 points. Enough for a record, right? But not a dramatic move to the
Exactly.
upside.
So really, it's more of the same. You see stocks move up over time. You see the S&P 500 set records. It's doing it in kind of a quiet way. You go back to, a couple years ago, this is what you saw consistently. It's like more of the same, even as the backdrop for the market changes. And certainly, fourth quarter earnings represents a substantial change in where we are.
So, Joe, what's catching your attention? What's the one thing investors need to know as they look forward to the last 2 hours of the trading day?
Well, obviously, the recent trade headline, the scoop from Bloomberg, that the tariffs aren't going to be lifted anytime soon, hitting the markets a little bit. But I still think the buoyancy of this market, because we started the day in the red, and then we went green, and we're still not down very much, 0.2% on the S&P 500, Dow still green. It feels like there's no question the trend is still higher. And it's not just that the trend is higher, but it's really, it's concentrated in some of these winners, FANG stocks, obviously just extraordinarily fast start to the year. Tesla, unbelievable run. Amazing. That's on. So all of these areas of the market that were sort of controversial, or people were like, oh, we're going to rotate out, we're going to rotate into value into 20. It's like, no, just back to the old winners.
Well, Tesla, it's up, another 2.6% today. Yeah. It's now up almost 29% for the year. I love Tom Metcalf's story on the Bloomberg today. Larry Ellison's faith in Tesla and his friend Elon Musk, while he's being rewarded for that, the Oracle chairman bought 3 million shares before joining Tesla's board back in December of 2008. That stake was worth $1 billion at the time. It's now worth $1.6 billion. So
that's a nice.
You know what else is interesting? I actually went back through my old charts today. I found out Aswath Damodaran, who's a professor at NYU, expert on valuation, he had this post out in the middle of last year about how he bought Tesla for less than $180 a share. Look at the stock. He's almost tripled his money in 7 months. That's just astounding. And by the way, we're about 3% away from Tesla becoming a $100 billion company by market value.
Unbelievable. Jason Kelly?
Which unlocks a whole lot of value for, I believe, several $100 million for Elon Musk. That controversial pay package. What are you watching? I'm looking at banks, and just interesting to see the varying results. And once again, everybody's doing great except Wells Fargo.
I know. They continue to have problems. And there was a line in their report about some costs, accruals for, was it litigation? I forget how they phrased it. But it was interesting because it was kind of like, it almost felt like we found out some more things about retail sales, I think, or sales practices, right? And it just makes you wonder, okay, when are we going to get to the end of this? When can we, just define the problems at the company and move on? And we're not quite there yet.
Charlie Scharf, the new CEO, said something to the effect of, I don't have all the answers yet. I haven't figured all this out, which, fair point, but investors are only going to be so patient. Reminds me a little bit of Larry Culp over at GE. It's like, you're the guy, you got to fix this, we're paying you a lot of money, and got to get to it.
Here was it. Let's see. They missed because the results included $1.5 billion of, quote, litigation accruals for a variety of matters, including previously disclosed retail sales practice matters. So previously disclosed, but nonetheless, that's a big number.
Right.
So.
All right. We're going to look more into bank earnings in just a few minutes. In the meantime, let's thank the team. Joe Weisenthal, markets editor for Bloomberg. He's headed off to TV. What'd you miss? Coming up at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. And Dave Wilson will be back with us in the 3 o'clock and the 4 o'clock hour with his chart and stock of the day, respectively. Let's do the Bloomberg Markets bite of the day, the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, I should say. One number that tells us a lot. Today's number, 25 years. You saw this.
We've been talking about this one, as you will expect once you hear it. Americans, bought less wine in 2019. Last year, the first such drop in 25 years as millennials opt for alternatives like hard seltzers, cocktails, and non-alcoholic beer. Volume of wine purchased in the U.S. declined 0.9% last year. First time it has fallen since 1994, according to industry tracker IWSR. Trend was ascribed to a generational shift as the number of millennials surpasses baby boomers who drove strong demand for wine in America. Oh, come on.
I know. You're millennials. What are they doing here?
I don't know what my millennials are doing. Drink some wine. There's so many great choices out there.
I know.
And as we have learned from our guests, you don't have to spend a lot for a great bottle of wine.
Exactly. All right. We're going to be following that story in 2020. In the meantime, let's get to Bob Moon. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. Britain, France, and Germany ratcheted up pressure on Iran today to stop violating its landmark nuclear deal in a last-ditch effort to resolve their differences through talks, while also starting a process that could bring back punishing UN sanctions on Tehran. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, meantime, called for a special investigation into the shooting down of that Ukrainian jetliner that killed 176 people. The Iranian government announced it has made arrests in the case. A coughing fit stopped the play at a qualifying match for the coming Australian Open tennis tournament. Slovenia's Dalia Jakupovic collapsed and had to withdraw from the match because of smoke caused by wildfires that have swept across Australia. The announcer at the match telling the crowd Jakupovic couldn't go on.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Miss Jakupovic is unable to continue. Game, set match, vocally.
Applause as she was assisted off the court. Match officials were criticized beforehand for going ahead with competition, even though a cloud of smoke hangs over Melbourne. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says forecasters expect more difficult, dry, and warm conditions in the months ahead. The National Security Agency has discovered what's classified as a major security flaw in Microsoft Windows. Microsoft says the NSA notified the company about it, and a fix was made available today. It will download automatically in some systems. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls, or cards that turn into money. Instead, you get business information from top-tier analysts and experts.
What should expectations be for this latest round of negotiations?
That's actually better, isn't it?
They're both trying to say they have the upper hand.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzz is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic...
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sale is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sale. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
This week's On the Media, tips and tricks for how to inoculate yourself against war propaganda.
If you watch Fox News, you'll see what can be fairly characterized as war lust. I shouldn't even say Fox News alone because it does permeate everywhere, and you really got to watch out for that.
War themes and memes on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it!
Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So the equity market earlier was trading at record levels. Then came news on the U.S.-China trade situation. We are hearing that the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the U.S. election, despite the Phase 1 trade deal that's expected to be signed tomorrow in Washington between the U.S. and China. We are told that any move to reduce these tariffs will depend upon Beijing's compliance with terms of the Phase 1 accord. So the Dow right now is negative by about 0.1%. In the broader market, S&P 500 being led lower by weakness in retail energy stocks, with the S&P down about 0.3%, and the Nasdaq Composite weaker by about 0.3% as well. We heard from many of the big banks earlier in the day, earnings for the fourth quarter. Wells Fargo disappointed. Those shares are down about 4% right now. On the positive side, J.P. Morgan's numbers beat the street, and the estimate, I should say, stock is up 1.3%. And Citigroup delivered earnings also ahead of forecast, and those shares rising by more than 2% right now. We are being told that Boeing is talking to a group of banks about a potential loan. Now, you know the company's been dealing with the production halt of the grounded 737 MAX jetliner. BA is the ticker right now, and I'm going to go to the Bloomberg terminal and bring up that stock very quickly. Had been trading up by about 1.3% earlier in the day when that news broke. Boeing shares right now only about 0.6% higher. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury with a yield of 1.81%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio and streaming live on YouTube, Carol.
So, Jason, Doug, of course, nicely setting up all the big bank earnings today, because we are seeing J.P. Morgan and Citi higher, Wells Fargo not so much. Let's lay it all out for you and also check in with a top-performing financial fund manager, get his view on this as well. First up, though, Allison Williams is with us. She's Senior Analyst, Global Investment Banks and Asset Management at Bloomberg Intelligence. She's in our Interactive Broker studio along with Anton Schutz. He's president and chief investment officer at Mendon Capital Advisors, based up in Rochester, New York. They've got about $750 million in assets under management. Great to have both of you here. Allison, I want to start with you. I know you've had a long day. You've been up early checking out these earnings numbers. What do we need to know about JP Morgan, Citi, and Wells?
So I would say the bottom line is healthy consumer. JP Morgan continues the story of being helped by market share gains. Citigroup came out with a new target. I think it's more of an achievable target. It's still above consensus. So their previous target had been 13.5% return on tangible equity, 12% for this year. They made the target for this year, so I thought that was a positive because they really kind of cut it close there. Their target for next year, 12 to 13%. I think consensus is slightly below that, but they're going to have an investor day in May, so hopefully we'll get more detail around that. Wells Fargo, the real negative news there is we had a big legal charge. So new CEO, new era.
Same old problems.
My guess would be we're trying to put we're trying to put things behind as much as we can. Of course, time will tell if they're being conservative at this juncture or, what the ultimate costs are. So the fears are that the legal costs could be more than people had anticipated. We know that litigation is a long tail risk. We know that the U.S. banks versus the European banks got their issues related to mortgage behind them, and that was good to get sooner rather than later, but more than expected, not good. And just again in general on expenses, right? So we have this big legal cost, which is very visible, but I think there's a lot of expenses related to all the issues they had. When are they going to go away? Not a lot of visibility, and sort of not a lot to, I guess, hang your hat on, as they would say, in terms of the near term.
And Anton, come on in here. I mean, if you had to distill it down, what would you say to people day one, sort of end of day one of earnings? What really jumped out?
As the consumer really is strong, and I think that's really what's going to drive the economy this year. So looking good there. Non-performing assets across really all asset classes, again, not an issue. No recession in sight, no pain. But the reality is this is a stock picker situation. I mean, very clearly, JP Morgan, is as nice a quarter as you could have. Maybe it's priced for perfection, but boy, great numbers, return on equity, everything was good. And Citi's the cheapest on a price to tangible book value, so all they needed was a little. That'll appeal to a value guy.
Right. What about, it's interesting. So on JP Morgan and Citi, JP Morgan was up 43% last year, and then you got a dividend on top of it. But I'm just wondering, when you look at these names, even with the run-up, as you say, these guys are doing well, do you add them to your portfolio? What do you do in an instance like this when you like them, right?
Well, that's the thing. If you're priced like that, you've got to keep performing that way. And, JP Morgan trades above 2 times book. I'm not sure how aggressive they'll be on their buyback up here. The numbers aren't quite the same as when you're trading at a discount to book or close to it. So Citi will be more aggressive. Wells will be more aggressive because that's kind of one of the only things they can do to drive earnings, under this revamp right now. So it'll be interesting to see how JP Morgan does on its buyback.
Wells, go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Wells, Allison. How much time do we give the new guy? Like, I would think, you go in and you want to hit the ground running, and you want to make sure, you want to say to your team, give it to me, give me everything, because anything else that is going to come out, I want to get it out and be done. Like, how much time do you give this?
But I think it is important, especially what the new management has to be thinking is that it has to be done right. So this is the third CFO, since September 2016, and I think a part of the issues with the prior CEOs were that they were internal, so they came from internal, so there was still a lot of political backlash, but also I think there were some issues with perhaps them not getting things done fast enough. But I think Charlie's going to want to come in and, make sure that the systems are in place and that things are truly behind them. I think where investors might get impatient is, as I said, having some kind of target, some kind of, sense of what the future is, what sort of direction the bank is going into. So maybe they don't have to check every box, but to give some kind of idea of targets and time frame. And And, keeping in mind the new CEO just came in, right after the last, it was right around the last earnings.
And Allison, just quickly, 30 seconds, what are you looking most forward to tomorrow as we continue to hear from big names?
Healthy consumer, good FIC at Bank of America and Goldman, really going to be looking at those trading numbers. We had a huge upside. We're expecting big growth from Goldman just because of the weak year ago. Bank of America held up a little bit year ago, but, trading and consumer are really where we're going to be focusing.
All right. Allison Williams, Senior Analyst for Global Investment Banks and Asset Management for Bloomberg Intelligence. She was here with us in our Interactive Brokers studio. Anton Schutz from Menden Capital Advisors. He's going to stick around. We're going to dig into maybe some smaller banks in just a minute. You're listening to Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. are likely to remain in place until after the election. And sources say any move to reduce them will hinge on China's compliance with the Phase 1 trade deal scheduled to be signed tomorrow. Latest trade talk isn't playing well on Wall Street. Stocks are off their highs for the day, dragging the major averages into negative territory for the session. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 5, the S&P 500 down 9, the Nasdaq Composite falling 32. Boeing reportedly is talking to a group of banks about a possible loan as it deals with a production halt of its grounded 737 MAX. Sources say Citigroup is leading the talks. The MAX grounding has cost Boeing its title as the world's largest plane maker. AllianceBernstein is putting out the help wanted sign. The asset management firm is adding 200 jobs as it relocates its headquarters from New York to Nashville. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need to know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business. Reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This weekend, Volvo are offering 0% APR finance on a Volvo Select approved used car, which means this weekend 0% of your morning run playlist will be listened to. So visit your local Volvo retailer this weekend and drive home an approved used car with 0% APR finance. You could run there, if you like.
Used vehicles up to 4 years old. Participating retailers. 50% deposit on minimum £7,000. Conditional sale. Terms, eligibility, guarantee requirements and conditions apply. Volvo Car Financial Services.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
On the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Anton Schutz. He is in town from Menden Capital Advisors. Great to have him in studio.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about the banks, the sector, not only the big guys, but some of the regional players as well. First up, though, let's get back to your top business stories and to Doug Krisner.
Hey, we're going to begin with the U.S.-China trade story. Tomorrow, of course, we are set for the Phase 1 deal signing in Washington. Despite that agreement, we are hearing the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the U.S. election. Now, we are told that any move to reduce them will hinge on the compliance on the part of China with the Phase 1 accord. Earlier, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite had extended records from yesterday's session, but both right now are down about 0.1% each. The Dow holding on to a gain of about 0.2%, largely because of J.P. Morgan shares. Those shares are up 2% after the company delivered earnings above estimates. Also earnings now that the season is in full swing here. Citigroup's numbers beat. Those shares are up 1.8%. Earnings, though, for the fourth quarter from Wells Fargo were disappointing, and that stock is down more than 2.5% right now. We also heard from Delta Airlines leading the carriers higher today. Profit was above estimates given strong domestic demand along with lower fuel prices and the proceeds from the sale of a stake in a Brazilian carrier, Delta shares right now ahead by more than 3%. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury with a yield of 1.81%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. Let's continue with Anton Schutz. He's President and Chief Investment Officer at Menden Capital Advisors, over $750 million in assets under management. I want to move on to some of the other names in the sector. Anything else that you think we need to know about the big three that reported today, Anton?
No, I think it was pretty self-explanatory in their numbers. One just obviously facing growth issues and regulations. Yeah. Look, if you don't have revenues, you can't put up numbers, and they're capped on growth for Wells Fargo.
Do you expect the same to continue as we hear from the rest of the big banks?
Yeah, I expect credit to be good. I expect FIC to be good. So the bar has been set for everybody.
Right.
So it's going to be a high hurdle for all the next reporters. And that usually happens, because if they don't blow away what we've seen today, they may actually trade off tomorrow on good numbers.
Right.
So, Anton, you've been looking at this sector for a time, I think it's fair to say. Here we are, 11, 12 years, depending on your math, I guess, away from the financial crisis. And, some of these banks are stronger than ever in many ways, especially a couple that report today, and most notably JP Morgan. What do you make of sort of the banking and the financial services sector here in 2020, a decade plus on from the financial crisis?
Well, we have less players. Consolidation among the bottom, not necessarily the top. The top consolidated during the crisis. They have way more capital than they've ever had. They've got a new accounting standard, CECL, which I won't get into, which is going to create even more of a cushion. So the banking industry is incredibly healthy. What they do have is fintech trying to get at them.
Right.
And they're certainly using technology offensively as well, but that's certainly something nipping at their heels. They have all these private debt funds stealing loans, which if you think about the next time there's trouble, they're going to be in those debt funds. The banks aren't doing it. The debt funds are. And so there's adverse selection in those.
This is like the private credit market that we talk so much about. Yeah,
exactly. And some of the better household names are doing a better job of it, but the lower tier names are having adverse selection. So, people aren't saying banks aren't lending. Banks are lending, but if you're going to lend to somebody at 7 or 8%, the banks are not going to charge that. So it's an adverse loan. And so those funds will eventually get hit.
When you look at some of the big names, it does feel like JP Morgan constantly hits it out of the park. Do you have a favorite name or one that you just, kind of respect the most in terms of strategy and how they play it?
Well, I give a lot of credit to Brian Moynihan at Bank of America because, he inherited, Countrywide, he inherited Merrill Lynch, and he's really made that all into one company, and he's really got them all working well together. So I think he's done an incredible amount of heavy lifting in not that many years. Jamie Dimon's done an incredible job for a lot of years, and he's had a good head start. But I think Brian's done a really, really good job at Bank of America in molding that company. And, I also think that, PNC has come a long ways as well. And, we'll see how they evolve. But from a technology standpoint, they've spent a tremendous amount of money and effort in becoming a bank that's becoming national.
Mm-hmm. Right. So speaking of the nation, Anton, let's talk a little bit more about some of the regional banks. I mean, where do you look for value there, and how do you assess them in this changing environment that you've described?
Sure. One of the things that has always driven me has been geography. And if you think about the geographies that have things going for them today, they're ones that have zero or no state income tax. So there's really great growth in places like Tennessee. The South has great growth anyway. Right. But if you go down to Florida, you get 1,000 people a day going to Florida. Texas has a tremendous amount of immigration as well. So those states already have got an advantage. So if you get the banks in those states, they've certainly got an advantage on a growth perspective. Then you think about other things that are going on that could be disruptive. You have a very large merger in the Southeast, which has taken place. Right. BB&T and SunTrust have gotten together. They've created a new company called Truist. And
worst name.
Worst name ever. That is. And I'll tell you, the whole industry sort of talks about it that they paid somebody for that name.
Yeah.
Look, SunTrust is a great name.
Great name.
BB&T was well respected. Nobody knew what that meant, but. Yeah, somebody got paid for Truist.
Anyway.
And we'll see if we laugh about that years from now or just it gets forgotten. But what that does is they're going to save $1.6 billion. Well, if they're saving $1.6 billion, that means there's a lot of bodies on the street. It means a lot of customers still looking for new homes.
Yeah.
So it's really good for those community banks in those markets.
Interesting.
If you're in Atlanta, people in Atlanta are mad that company's left.
Right.
Right.
If you're in a lot of North Carolina.
The latest bank to leave. There has been that sort of migration of a sort of all the banks to Charlotte from Atlanta. I say this as a former Atlantan. It's painful to watch.
Yeah. Even if you just go to Winston-Salem and you look at BB&T moving to Charlotte, there's 2,000 jobs affected. So, that disruption is an advantage for all the small community banks in every one of those markets. So people want to be in Atlanta, and there's a lot of good growth, and there's a lot of chips that are falling off the table.
Among the regional names that you are invested in, what do you think is a name that maybe folks should look at? Maybe it's below their radar, but maybe
absolutely.
They should be looking at it.
Yeah, I'll give them a couple that actually have some.
Just get about 40 seconds.
Some market cap. So I've got a Ameris Bank. They've got a nice market share in Atlanta. They bought a company called Fidelity Southern. So they're in those states. They're in Florida. They're in Georgia. They've got great growth. And, I think they're also a great acquisition target potentially as well. And then Veritex in Texas. They're in Dallas and Houston, about $8 billion in size. So, I'm not sure they want to go above that Dodd-Frank level. And so I could see them, potentially being a great acquisition target. They're buying back a lot of stock. So, it's got a nice safety net underneath it and two great growth markets.
Great stuff. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Love talking about the sector with you. Anton, thank you. Anton Schutz, he's President and Chief Investment Officer at Menden Capital Advisors, joining us in our Interactive Brokers studio. Great discussion, and we're not done with the bank earnings.
No, we're far from done with the banks, and lots more to come on that today, tomorrow,
Speaking
and
of
as
not
we
being
get
done.
into earnings. Yeah, we're certainly not done with Bob Moon. He's got your world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. After weeks of delay and strategizing, the U.S. House is planning to vote tomorrow to send the articles of impeachment against President Trump to the Senate to start the trial on removing him from office. Speaker Nancy Pelosi met privately today at the Capitol with House Democrats about next steps, ending her blockade a month after they voted to impeach Trump on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of justice. The European Union is planning to dedicate a quarter of its budget to tackling climate change and has also set up a system to shift 1 trillion euros in investment toward making the EU's economy more environmentally friendly over the next 10 years. EU officials say the Europe investment plan unveiled today will be funded by the bloc's budget and by the private sector. It's been a decade since the Supreme Court's historic decision in Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. On one side, those who support the decision that large corporations should be able to contribute to campaigns they support. But today, Democrats mark the 10-year anniversary, lamenting what's resulted.
That ruling allowed billions of dollars in dark and undisclosed money to infiltrate our politics and drown out the voices of the voters, of the people.
Maryland Congressman Steny Hoyer was joined by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in condemning the outsized influence big business can have on government.
We are a government of the many, not a government of the money.
In that ruling, the Supreme Court overturned mandates for campaign spending disclosures, saying they violate free speech protections and allowed unlimited corporate and union spending on political issues. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run, run, run.
Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Equities have been whipsawed a bit today by news that despite this Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China, we are hearing that current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the election. We are told any move to reduce them is contingent on Beijing's compliance with terms of this Phase 1 accord. The Dow right now with a gain of about 0.3%, but the S&P 500 is holding on to a slim gain right now. It's less than 0.1%. Similar story for the NASDAQ composite. Boeing right now trading up. We are hearing that the company is talking to a group of banks about a potential loan. Now, you know that Boeing is facing a production halt of that grounded 737 MAX jetliner. We are told Citigroup is leading discussions between Boeing and a small group of banks. Speaking of banks, a number of them reported fourth quarter earnings today, and in the case of JP Morgan, the numbers were better than expected. Morgan shares right now up by more than 2.2%, and that's really the reason the Dow is higher at this point. Numbers from Wells Fargo, though, are a little disappointing, and that stock is down about 4% right now. In terms of the bond market, 10-year Treasury coming in yield terms by about 2.5 basis points. We had a soft reading on core CPI earlier, up just 0.1% in December from the prior month. Seems as though a deceleration in shelter cost was a big factor for that very soft reading. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
You know, I feel like this Carlos Ghosn story, Carol, every time we think, wow, that's the most interesting thing I've heard, or what a twist, or
not.
What a great detail.
No, it's not.
It is not. And thanks to some stellar reporting from Matt Campbell, there's just a constant stream of new information. He led a team that put together a really nice piece. It's in this week's magazine on the Bloomberg Terminal and on Bloomberg.com today. Matt joins us on the phone from Beirut. He's still on the ground on the Ghosn story, and Joel Weber, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week, is here with us in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. So, Matt, I got to ask you, especially since you have the perspective of really being in this story, what's the thing in this story about the escape itself that you really just zero in on as Carol Master would say, whoa moment?
Well, I think there's quite a lot to say wow about in this story. I'm interested in all the scenarios that were examined to get Carlos Ghosn out of Japan. There's some discussion of that in this piece which was published. Notably, there was some discussion of actually buying a cargo ship and sneaking him onto it, though that was rejected as too complicated. And in the end, they did get to this very dramatic private jet escape that we now know a little bit more about.
Which, this to me, and the wonder of this story, it's like all these little dribs and drabs that have come out over the last week and change. Actually, ever since the story really broke at the beginning of the year, we've all been captivated by it. Part of what made this be, I think, this epic part 3 of this story that Matt's been kind of shepherding is this inside the plan of how to get somebody out of a country, how to extract someone. And it's a very movie-esque, but the reason it can be movie-esque is because of real reporting. And Matt, can you kind of walk us through how the story opens?
Well, so the story opens with a security contractor in Asia, someone who does this kind of thing, escorting VIPs, as protecting cargoes. He gets a call a few months ago from someone he knows who is looking to hire for a job in Japan, looking particularly to escort someone out of the country and looking for operatives with East Asian faces particularly. And the security contractor was sort of non-committal, and no one really came to mind, and he never really thought of it again. So, of course, he saw the news along with the rest of the world on New Year's Eve.
And that's when you connect the dots. And what one of the things that I've been kind of captivated by in this is obviously Carlos Ghosn had the means to actually fund something like this. But what would it go down for? What does this service actually cost someone?
Well, that's a very good question. One estimate that I've heard was $15 million. Which, when I first heard it, sounded insanely high. But the person who was providing that estimate to me then took me through the math. And one thing that you have to add at every point in that calculation is, for lack of a better term, a risk premium. Right. This is flagrantly illegal. Everyone involved could be exposed to arrest, obviously. And people need to be compensated for that kind of risk-taking.
Yeah, and when you say everyone, we've actually got some names. You've got a Michael Taylor, and then you've got a buddy of Michael Taylor. I mean, we've got names on the individuals who are believed to have helped Carlos Ghosn get out of Japan.
That's right. So far, just two names. Michael Taylor being the leader of the group, a very interesting guy with a somewhat checkered history. Former Green Beret, very experienced Special Forces operator, ended up in the private security business, but actually ended up going to jail in the mid-2010s over federal charges to do with allegedly bribing his way to a contract in Afghanistan. So really someone who's operated in some gray areas and pulled off this amazing coup on behalf of Carlos Ghosn.
So, Matt, I mentioned earlier that this is sort of the part 3 in the magazine of a Carlos Ghosn trilogy that you've basically been steering from the moment, that Japanese officials basically arrested him on a tarmac a year and change ago. So what have you learned, and what is this escape? What, put it all in context. What does it mean for people to know?
Well, I think the big thing here is that he has now turned the tables. Over the last year, he seemed pretty helpless. This real titan of business, this very respected corporate figure, was suddenly just completely at the mercy of the Japanese justice system, and none of the advantages he had, money, connections, access to the media, whatever, it didn't seem to count for anything. And it was really a tale of a guy kind of alone, kind of abandoned, and facing a pretty grim fate. That's now completely changed. He has gotten out of the threat of being sent to a Japanese prison, though he's certainly not out of the woods yet, as we discuss in the story.
What? Right. And I want to end on that note, Matt, if we can. I mean, not out of the woods because he's essentially, without overstating it, sort of a different type of prisoner at this point. By some accounts, he's not free to go in any sense, right?
Well, he is, Jason, certainly free to live here in Lebanon.
Right.
At least as far as we know, there is a judicial proceeding that is going to run its course here, but it's very unlikely he will be extradited. So he's fine to be here for now. He certainly can't travel anywhere except perhaps to France, where he's also a citizen. And the other thing is, his reputation has not yet been rehabilitated, and I think if he entertains thoughts of a comeback, which he very well might, there's a long way to go to that.
And I'm just going to say, as you so rightfully include in your story, it's another case of the winner-take-all in the game of 21st century capitalism. If you got money and means, you can get yourself out, Matt, just quickly.
Indeed, yeah. Well, it turns out that we were very surprised in Japan that he couldn't beat the system, but he was able to exit the system, which is not something that most criminal defendants do.
It's the other option. Go way outside the box.
If you can't beat the system, just change the system altogether.
Go in a box to go way outside the box.
Exactly. You got to get in the box. All right, Matt Campbell, thank you so much. Senior reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from Beirut. A terrific story. It's in the upcoming issue of Bloomberg, but available on the terminal and Bloomberg.com today.
And our thanks to Jill, too. PG&E nearing a deal with a group of creditors led by Pacific Investment Management and Elliott Management that would have the bondholders scrap their rival restructuring plan in exchange for a mix of equity and new debt. This according to People and Familiar. PG&E shares, man, they're up about 7.8%. So pop in on that news. We'll continue to track it right here on Bloomberg Radio.
On this week's On the Media, tips and tricks for how to inoculate yourself against war propaganda.
If you watch Fox News, you'll see what can be fairly characterized as war lust. I shouldn't even say Fox News alone because it does permeate everywhere. And you really got to watch out for that.
War themes and memes on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
It's 3 p.m. on Wall Street from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York. I'm Doug Krisner. So we have an hour remaining in today's session. It's been a little volatile, to say the least, a bit of chop in the water. The Dow is higher by about 0.2%, largely because of some good earnings from J.P. Morgan earlier in the day. But we've been taken from the best levels of the day onward that as it relates to this U.S.-China trade deal, now we are hearing current tariffs on Chinese goods will remain in place until after the election. We are told any move to reduce them is kind of contingent on Beijing's compliance with terms of the Phase 1 trade deal. So the S&P 500 down from a record by about 0.1%. Similar story for the NASDAQ composite. Amazon shares weaker by more than 1%. Apparently, the company's clampdown on FedEx is over. Dow Jones reporting that Amazon has notified its third-party merchants they can once again use FedEx ground network to ship orders placed under the Prime membership program. This news has strengthened shares in FedEx. They are up about 3%. Boeing is apparently talking to a group of bankers about a potential loan. We are told that a Citigroup is leading the discussions between Boeing and a group of banks. Shares in Boeing right now ahead by about 0.8%. In the bond market, meantime, U.S. 10-year Treasury with a yield of 1.81%. That's a look at markets and your Bloomberg Business Flash. Got to continue here for a few moments, my bad. A couple of stories to get in. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the grounding of the 737. We were told that as addition to the story about Citigroup, that Boeing has now lost the crown for biggest plane manufacturer to Airbus. Last year, Boeing delivered about 380 jetliners. That was less than half the total for Airbus last year. And speaking of planes, Delta Airlines shares trading up about 3%. The carrier is higher after reporting earnings above forecast. Apparently some strong domestic demand here, along with lower fuel prices helping out, along with the proceeds from the sale of a stake in the Brazilian carrier. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's do a little Business Week economics now. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg. She's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. And Andrew Husby, U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, also here with us. So, Andrew, I want to start with you. Like, what's the thing that everybody's talking about on the economics desk today as you guys are catching up?
There's quite a bit going on. We had both a CPI report earlier this morning. Really showed a distinct lack of upward price momentum, and some of this is due to some factors that have been building for a little while. Rent growth has slowed a bit. You've seen basically a deceleration in core goods prices, and this has been a reflection of the tariffs not coming through from China. Effectively, the full impact has been kind of shielded from consumers by a reduction in the Chinese currency, and also basically pressuring of these price increases along the supply chain. So there's a distinct lack of move there, and also this afternoon's news, I think, about the tariffs remaining in place through the election. I think that's not a terrible surprise. I think we kind of expected not much to happen after this phase one deal, but the longer this period of uncertainty lingers, maybe we don't get the boost to business investment that we thought we might get earlier, as some of the optimism came through in markets. So it's something we're watching closely. I think on the other hand, you look at this and you say, well, uncertainty lingers, but if we know that uncertainty lingers, that's actually maybe in some ways an increase in certainty, because businesses are like, all right, well, we know this is happening, but at least this is the environment we can count on for the next year, even though it might be a drag.
I want to bring in Kathleen, but I want to ask you one more question. The real average weekly earnings number, unchanged flat. I mean, we're watching wages so closely because we've got to see if there's enough momentum to keep consumers confident in out there spending.
Yeah, and this is the other element looking ahead towards retail sales this later this week. So the issue there is in part due to revisions we got in last week's jobs report. The average hourly earnings number came down quite a bit. So some of that is a reflection of that, but certainly lower real income growth is a negative, and we're looking at growth kind of stepping lower into year end, combined with, number one, the consumer is the main source of growth at the moment, and if we get moderation there plus less business investment, it's going to be a soft year.
Right, and reconcile with the consumer being strong that we're hearing from the big banks.
Right, absolutely.
So, Kathleen Hayes, come on in on this. What do you think is the one thing that investors need to know about the bond market trade today?
Well, a bit of a rally, kind of, putting back what it took away. Doug just hit an upper quarter point on the 10-year to 1.81. The 30-year bond is up more than a half point to 2.27, but again, not big moves. We're still very tightly in a range. Bond market, like the stock market, is waiting to see how this moves ahead. And, for example, I was at this conference at the University of Chicago Booth School on Friday where I moderated a panel, and I think there's a lot of concern that, no, trade is not going to come roaring back. And the investment has been so weak, and it's going to take a lot to reinsure investors that, you can jump in with both feet. Right. But I just don't think we should overlook this story, which I think is so important. China coming under greater international pressure to reduce industrial subsidies after the U.S., Europe, and Japan agreed to push for stronger World Trade Organization rules against market-distorting government aid. I think, broadly speaking, if you look at how trade is moving ahead, this shows, I think it's very important when this happens, when, three big blocks get together. Right. But for bonds, the story that I saw today, that I think, if you guys don't see me here anymore, it's because this is what happens. A decade without Fed hikes comes into view for bond investors. If I can't talk about Fed hikes or cuts, I just don't know what I'm going to do. But, a lot of people are looking at the fact that inflation is just tethered below 2%, and you just can't move above it. If inflation doesn't go above, are you going to get hikes? Probably not. You're going to have to hope for some huge slowdown, which you don't really want to hope for, to see a cut. But I think bond markets, much more than the stock markets right now, are just kind of stuck in the mud.
Yeah, this inflation question is one that, it's not just the Fed, it's every central bank across the world, and they're dealing with, the realization is that there are global factors at play, whether it's technology, globalization, some of that's running in reverse, but there's still a ton of competition out there, and this is impacting prices. And something we saw in the latest Fed minutes, we've talked about this when they came out, but effectively the Fed is struggling with how to communicate to the public that inflation, the target they're looking for is 2%, and the public says, hey, you know what, we like lower prices, things are cheaper, we're worried about the cost of living, so why is this a problem? And this is, you're seeing it repeatedly come up. Effectively, the Fed is working against some very powerful forces, and it's, rate hikes are the tool, and it's the tool they'll stick with until they get to change their mandates.
How much are you guys watching the housing market? A story that popped up on the Bloomberg that caught my attention, and it's entitled "Housing Upswing to Cushion the U.S. Economy from Sluggish Investment," basically saying that the strength that we're seeing, or the rejuvenation that we're seeing in the U.S. housing market, is going to help out the economy, especially when we maybe not see the corporate spending that we keep all kind of waiting. It says home construction outlays, which account for about 4% of GDP, increased for a fifth straight month in November. So I do wonder, the housing market too, how important.
Well, let me just jump in really quickly before Andrew gives us the whole eco view. Bonds are going to stay on your side. you're not going to see we haven't seen a big sell-off in bonds. It doesn't look like we're going to get it. At least that's going to help keep a lid on mortgage rates, and that's so important to that industry.
Right. Affordability is a big question, and also there are positive demographics at play. There is a segment of the population moving towards that household formation mode, but
millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever, they're going to ultimately buy a home.
All of that, you'd expect.
So dismissive.
I know.
The one thing we might be looking at too is a little bit of an impact from weather, and this sort of downdraft in rates came at a time of year when activity starts to slow down, so there might be seasonals at play too that impact the numbers, but it's certainly, the momentum has been very strong recently. So
that's what, but the focus is really on the consumer right now in the United States, right? The investment hasn't picked up. There's trade uncertainty still. That retail sales report, if it goes either side of expectations, a lot stronger or a lot weaker, that could move bonds.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Andrew Husby, U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, Kathleen Hayes, global economics and policy editor for Bloomberg. Coming up, we're going to talk about Boeing. Brooke Sutherland, she's got a take, to say the least, pretty strong take. She follows this company pretty closely and ties it in with some other CEO behavior and CEO compensation that we've seen elsewhere, because one of the stories on the Bloomberg that's getting a lot of attention is about that pay package for Mr. Calhoun.
Absolutely. Let's not give too much of it away, because it's really a great read. Deep tease. It's a great write and a great read by Brooke. But there's several stories on Boeing, so we'll get into all of that as well. In the meantime, let's get back to world and national news headlines. Let's get back to Bob Moon.
Carol, the leader of the Senate, is keeping the door firmly shut on the idea of hearing any additional evidence in the impeachment trial of President Trump. Republican leader Mitch McConnell puts it this way: if the case is strong, there should be no need for additional testimony. And if the case is weak, House Democrats should not have impeached in the first place.
Here's how deep we have come into bizarro world. The latest Democratic talking point is that if the Senate conducts a trial based on what the House itself looked at, we'll be engaged in a cover-up.
McConnell spoke as the House prepares to vote tomorrow on delivering the articles of impeachment to the Senate. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi discussed her plans at a closed meeting with the Democratic caucus, whose chairman, Hakeem Jeffries, spoke afterward.
The Speaker indicated that articles of impeachment will be transmitted to the Senate at some point tomorrow.
Jeffries was asked about reports that Russian hackers had penetrated the Ukrainian company that employed Hunter Biden.
Vladimir Putin appears to be at it again, potentially manufacturing evidence to help his buddy Donald Trump. That would be a disgrace.
Jeffries said House impeachment managers would also be named imminently. On Capitol Hill, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Sheriff's officials say a 37-year-old woman tried to build an explosive device inside a Walmart store in Florida. Hillsborough County Sheriff's officials say a security guard noticed Emily Stollard opening unpaid items, including flammable materials, projectiles, and matches. They say he and a wildlife officer in the store stopped her as she was about to light a wick. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Full breakfast, cup of coffee, whatever you have in the morning, have it at daybreak.
Event risk is taking center stage for traders.
Nathan Hager.
We get a policy decision from the Federal Reserve.
And Karen Moscow.
It is the fifth major industry player to make some sort of zero commission offer.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Bloomberg has more from Hong Kong.
Weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the...
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
With about 43 minutes to go in today's trading session, the equity market is off session highs. We obviously have on the horizon the signing of this Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China. Now, despite that agreement, we're hearing current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will remain in place until after the U.S. election. We are being told that the move to reduce them would only come if Beijing were to be compliant with the terms of this Phase 1 accord. So that's the big picture. Let's drill down and get to the Bloomberg Macro Squawk Desk and check in with Bill Maloney for price action. Bill.
And good afternoon, Doug. That's right. U.S. stocks with an afternoon fade after those trade headlines. Dow's currently up 17 points, was up 147. S&Ps are down 6, while the Nasdaq falls by 21. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.81%. Gold is down a point. Small caps rise 2 points, and just 3 of the main 11 S&P sectors are trading higher right now, with gains in healthcare, industrials, and the financials. Real estate and tech led to the downside. Nasdaq Biotechs rise 1.4%. Transports jump 120, helped by news on FedEx. Semis are a little changed, and the VIX is up by 3%. Leaders of the upside on the Dow, JP Morgan, Pfizer, and Nike, while Apple and ExxonMobil fell 1%. And led to the downside. After earnings, JP Morgan rose 1.4%. Citigroup jumped 1.9%, while Wells Fargo fell 4.7%. In other news, FedEx jumped 3% intraday on a report that Amazon has lifted the ban on FedEx Ground. And wrapping things up, Bank of America and Goldman Sachs continue bank earnings tomorrow in the pre-market. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Doug.
All right, Bill, thank you. Right now we've got a stable dollar and a slightly weaker yen here at 109.97. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thanks a lot. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Talk a little bit about Boeing because there are lots of stories on the terminal, but one in particular really caught our attention, and it has to do with why the Boeing CEO doesn't need a bonus to fix the 737 MAX. Brooke Sutherland is deals and industrials columnist at Bloomberg Opinion. She is in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We've been talking before we got going on air. Lay out your argument here.
So I think it's helpful to talk about exactly what the new Boeing CEO is getting paid. So he is getting a salary, about $1.4 million. He's getting a bonus that should pay out at target in 2020 at no less than target. So that's $2.5 million. He gets long-term incentive awards worth about $7 million, and then a special dispensation of about $10 million to make him whole for what he left at Blackstone. And then on top of all of that, he's getting this special $7 million bonus if he can get the MAX flying again successfully and safely.
So that's salary plus 4 bonuses, I think I figured out.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's egregious when you think about the fact that there is nothing more fundamental to the Boeing CEO's job right now than getting the 737 MAX flying again. So you would think that this would be covered by some of those other payments and bonuses.
Like coming into the job, okay, that's my number one responsibility as CEO. That's my job.
So what's the argument on the other side here?
Look, I think that people often make the argument that you need to throw a lot of money at executives to get them to take on these especially difficult situations. I don't think I ever really agree with that. I think you could find a lot of people willing to take a much lower salary to run a company like Boeing, but with the case of Dave Calhoun, I mean, he's been on the Boeing board since 2009. He was in the running to be CEO at one point, lost that job to Jim McNerney. I mean, his reputation is very much on the line here as well for all of those decisions that he blessed as a Boeing board member. And so I think salvaging his own reputation should arguably have been incentive enough to take this job.
And what does this say? And, you know, it's hard to look at this and not think about, of course, his predecessor and sort of that pay package and sort of the intricacies. And we talked about that late last week, but also some other places where Dave Calhoun has worked, most notably GE, you know, where we've seen not just the compensation piece, but just the kind of enabling of this kind of CEO culture. And I know you've written a lot about that. That seems to be at the core of this too, right?
I would agree with that. I think that as we have gone through this MAX crisis, I have seen a lot of parallels to GE. I covered GE throughout all of its problems, and I think there are a lot of similarities there, and I don't think that's a coincidence. You have a lot of former GE executives that went to Boeing, including Dave Calhoun, and I think that you have this culture of profit must come first, but also the executives are removed from the day-to-day, and so they have these objectives, but they're not necessarily aware of what the employees are doing. I think you saw that with Dennis Muhlenberg, where he appeared before Congress and said he did not, in fact, know the contents of those first batch of disturbing messages among employees until they were made public.
Right.
And I think that's really telling in terms of what this culture is. And, you know, Boeing has said these are a few employees and you know, this doesn't represent who Boeing is, but the onus is on them to really prove that.
Especially when you've got stories, as we said, multiple stories on the Bloomberg today about, you know, more emails and that are coming to light to show about what was going on the inside, to show kind of some of the turmoil. I guess what I think about this, Brooke, is you talk about culture, whether it was Boeing or General Electric. I feel like this is across many industries that, you know, we used to kid, and for years you've seen this, if not for decades, a CEO coming in, you know, it's got a package coming in and also negotiates the package going out. They are covered on both ends. You know, I don't know, how do you change this? Because, you know, boards are voting on this, and those boards are, you know, I think, agreement that you need to have these packages. How do you change this?
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's basically, I don't think there's great incentives there for the CEOs to do the right thing. Sure, there's upside potential to your compensation, but there's very little downside risk. There's a limit. I mean, you brought up Dennis Muhlenberg. He's still walking away with, you know, I think $80 million. And a lot of that is pension and deferred compensation and vested stock options.
But where are the shareholders or the activists to say, because ultimately, right, it's shareholders that pay for it?
But I think that requires a pivot in the thinking among shareholders, and you're starting to see some of that. You're seeing a lot more shareholders talk about all stakeholders and caring about the overall picture, but that hasn't historically been the case. And a lot of these CEOs, the numbers looked good under Dennis Muhlenberg. I mean, Boeing seemingly could do no wrong before these MAX crises. The stock price just kept going up. They just kept generating more and more cash flow. So if you're a shareholder, you must have felt pretty good about that at the time. And even with GE, to a certain extent, you know, it was never at that point where shareholders were really up in arms until it was.
Well, it just makes me feel like it's a much more passive. You become much more passive in your position potentially.
Well, and on the other side, I mean, I also think a lot about the private equity model here, which obviously Dave Calhoun spent some time at Blackstone, and this is private equity playbook in a lot of ways, basically saying incentive payments, you know, throw a lot of money at somebody in order to solve a problem, but that does ignore, to your point, Brooke, this sort of much more holistic look that people are trying to take. It's such a great take. Brooke Sutherland, Deals and Industrials columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Check that out. It's one of the most read on the Bloomberg today. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are mixed to higher. Talk that U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay put until after Election Day halted a modest rally. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 23, the S&P 500 down 5, the Nasdaq Composite is down 19. Google is giving up cookies, the kind advertisers use to follow us online. Not right away, but Google says its Chrome browser will stop supporting cookies over the next 2 years. Apple's Safari browser already blocks them. FedEx Ground is back in Amazon's good graces. The Wall Street Journal reports Amazon has lifted its ban on FedEx Ground for orders shipped by third-party merchants. It says FedEx now meets on-time requirements. Exponential Fitness, the franchise owner of fitness brands including Club Pilates and Cycle Bar, is planning to go public. Sources say it will raise $300 million in an offering that will value Exponential at about $1 billion. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscribe.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home! And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down. Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it!
Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to talk about Tesla WOA, as you would say.
WOA. I love any Tesla story. Anyway, we'll get into it in just a moment. First up, let's get back to what's going on in the world of business. Check on trading. 29 minutes to go, Doug Krisner.
You're right about that, Carol. The day began on an up note after stronger than forecast earnings from both J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup. Those stocks remain higher at this hour. J.P. Morgan shares up 1.3%. Citi shares higher by about 1.7%. Wells Fargo was a bit disappointing, and that stock is down right now about 5%. But the overall averages, or the benchmarks, I should say, came off their best levels of the day with word that current U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports will remain in place until after the U.S. election. Despite this Phase 1 agreement that we're expecting to have signed tomorrow, any move to reduce these tariffs will hinge on Beijing's compliance with terms of the new Phase 1 accord. Right now, the Dow is holding onto a very slim gain. We're up just about 0.1%. The S&P down from an all-time high by 0.2%. Similar decline for the NASDAQ composite. Dow Jones is reporting that Amazon has notified its third-party merchants they can once again use FedEx Ground to ship orders placed under the Amazon Prime membership program. Amazon shares are down a little more than 1% right now, but this news has boosted FedEx. Stock is up more than 2% right now. The earnings from Delta Airlines, better than expected. Those shares are up 3%. In the bond market, we've got a U.S. 10-year yield at 181. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thank you. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg.
A little Grateful Dead for you on this.
My 17-year-old just told me the other day, like, listen to more Grateful Dead. So proud of him.
Is that nice?
Yeah.
You're like, yay.
Dave Wilson's here with us. Long, strange trip.
Absolutely. The scary thought is that, we're coming up on 25 years since Jerry Garcia died.
Crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, that's a landmark, absolutely. But I want to talk about a shorter time frame, 10 years.
Okay.
As it refers to what's going on in the stock market. There's been a lot of focus on smaller companies relative to larger ones and how, the S&P 500 is being dominated by a few stocks. You had a story out about that yesterday.
Right.
So what I did is look at a ratio of the S&P 500 equal weight index, where every company counts the same, regardless of market value, relative to the S&P 500 itself, which of course takes market value into account. And it's been sort of a round trip over the last 10 years. We are back now to where we were in January 2010 for this ratio. It's been coming down pretty steadily the last 3 years or so, and the retreat is kind of accelerated this year. So it's noteworthy in the sense, we've got a long way to go before we get to the lows that we saw in the most recent bear market, going back 2008 or so. Nonetheless, it's another way, beyond, say, looking at the Russell 2000 index of smaller companies to gauge sort of this, comparison between, the biggest companies, think about the technology stocks that we all, know and love, so to speak, and, those smaller companies, which are very much a part of the market as well. And, it just highlights how things are not necessarily what they seem, even as the S&P 500 has been setting records. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We'll see you in just a bit. I want to bring you a headline crossing the Bloomberg right now. The U.S. seeking biggest change in decades to economic data releases. The Labor Department, Carol, may seek removal of computers from the data lockup, and the plan to alter data lockups could come as soon as this week. This is a big deal.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what the context is for this, so we'll look for a little bit more perspective in terms of the whys and when this might all go into effect. But nonetheless, some big changes in terms
we're
of
talking
potentially
about
how we, whether it's the labor
jobs
report.
Yeah, exactly.
Your CPI, PPI, which we're getting as we speak. So, this week. So we'll look for a little bit more context on that and the significance of it and what you need to know in terms of investors and what it means in terms of understanding that data and the impact. All right, let's get to a story that certainly caught our attention today, and that has to do with Tesla. Appears to be riding on the ludicrous mode. I love this. If you own or up to speed on all things Tesla, you know exactly what we're talking about. Here to explain is Esha Day. She is equity markets reporter at Bloomberg News in our interactive broker studio. So describe the mode and tell us what you're talking about.
Sure, and thanks for having me. So the ludicrous mode for Tesla lovers know everywhere is essentially a mode that allows the car to accelerate super fast, and that's
so
exactly
Elon Musk.
So the name is Elon Musk, right? Absolutely. And that's exactly what we are seeing. Like, that fits right in with what we're seeing with Tesla shares, especially so far this year. I mean, we have just had, 9 trading days, and the shares are up almost 30% so far. I mean, the market is up like barely 1.5%.
And so what accounts for that? I mean, obviously China drew a lot of headlines, but what has investors so bullish at this point?
That is a great question. So Tesla has had a few pretty positive developments in recent past. And I say recent past because, in late October, the company reported a surprise profit for the third quarter, and that was like an overhang for a very long time. So that definitely made people more bullish. And then pretty early this month, the company reported I would say strong deliveries, or better than expected deliveries for the fourth quarter. And the company also, their China plant factory came online. So all of these are definitely positive developments, definitely developments that people had a little bit of doubt about. So that's contributing. Another thing that people say could be contributing is a short squeeze. I mean, this is a stock that is known as a battleground stock.
Still about a 19%. If you look at the percentage of float out there, 19% of Tesla shares are being shorted. Right.
That is correct. And let's keep in mind that number was at 36.4% as recently as June last year.
It's amazing. I mean, just the run-up that this has had. I mean, we were talking about it when we were at our desk, this notion that trading in the almost mid-500s, well past that famous 420 mark that Elon Musk made so famous and got him in so much trouble. Esha Day is equity markets reporter for Bloomberg. She joined us in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Well, coming up, we're going to get you to the close of trading here on a Tuesday, a day where the markets were bumping along, feeling good about another record, and some headlines by Bloomberg about tariffs and their lasting effect, or their refusal to go away, I guess is one way to think about it. Has spooked the market. Tariffs on Chinese goods, even on the verge of this phase one trade deal that's meant to be signed tomorrow.
Yeah, we're definitely off our highs of the day. Right now we've got the
S&P's bounced around a little bit. Like it peaked up into positive territory and now back down to close to its lows of the day.
Yeah, exactly. All right, continuing to track that as we count you down to the close. First up, though, let's get back to World and National News headlines. Bob Moon in our 1130 newsroom. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. It's not going to happen. That's what members of the Republican-controlled Senate say about President Trump's push for outright dismissal of his impeachment trial before it begins. Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri tells reporters his party doesn't have the votes to do that. And Republican Lamar Alexander of Tennessee says the Senate should listen to the arguments.
I would vote against a motion to dismiss. We have a responsibility to hear the case. A constitutional responsibility, and a motion to dismiss is not consistent with that.
Trump argues that even holding the trial would give what he calls the partisan witch hunt credibility. Rougher and sharper jabs are expected as a tighter field of Democrats take the stage for tonight's final debate before Iowa's leadoff presidential caucuses. Just 6 candidates are gathering in Des Moines. That's the smallest number yet on a debate stage. The new dynamic will offer candidates more opportunities to criticize each other's proposals as well as tout their own. It was a shocking discovery at an Airbnb in South Lake Tahoe, California. John Segarra and his family had gone there for a few days of vacation. Within 10 minutes of arriving, his children found a loaded gun in a drawer along with a police badge.
I'm very angry about it. My kids found a loaded weapon in their room.
It was a Ruger 380 handgun with a fully loaded clip. Police picked up the items. It turned out the gun and badge were mistakenly left by an off-duty Santa Clara County Sheriff's who stayed at the Airbnb before.
Imagine if they were playing with it.
The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department says the deputy has been placed on leave. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald.
a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down. Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Along the goal line, scores! And takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
And a move, and a shot, face up!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So with about 13 minutes to go in today's session, it's a mixed picture for the equity market. The day began on an up note with stronger than forecast earnings from both J.P. Morgan and Citigroup. Those shares remain higher, with Morgan up about 1%. Citigroup shares higher by about 1.5%. Trouble spot, though, for Wells Fargo. The bank disappointed, and the stock is down 2.7%. We were kind of drifting modestly to the upside, and then came news regarding U.S.-China trade. You know, the signing of this Phase 1 deal is set for tomorrow, and we are hearing that in spite of the agreement, current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the election. Any move to reduce them will be contingent upon Beijing's compliance with terms of this Phase 1 accord. Right now, the Dow holding on to a gain of 0.1%, but the S&P and the NASDAQ each weaker by about 0.1%, and that takes us from record highs. Amazon shares drifting lower. Dow Jones reported earlier that Amazon has notified third-party merchants they can once again use FedEx Ground to ship orders under the Amazon Prime membership program. That news has boosted FedEx shares, trading up just about 2% right now. Earnings from Delta Airlines stronger than forecast. There was a healthy domestic demand here, along with lower fuel prices. That helped out, as did proceeds from the sale of a stake in a Brazilian carrier. Delta shares right now better by 3.2%. Meantime, in the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.81%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close on this Tuesday. Back with us is Michael Sheldon, Executive Director, Chief Investment Officer at RDM Financial Group. Michael joining us once again on the phone from Westport, Connecticut. Michael, Happy New Year. Nice to have you here with Jason and myself. It's been a fascinating day to watch the equity markets, which kind of started out with some losses and they rallied. Thank you, bank earnings. Thank you, even Boeing. Some news there. And then fell off on that trade headline, tariffs on China specifically going to be there until after the U.S. presidential election. I don't know. Do you care about any of this, or do you focus on fundamentals, or are you just picking stocks? What are you doing here in this market?
Well, I think you have to look at the big picture. It's been said that markets climb a wall of worry. Well, in 2019, there was plenty to worry about between the trade war with China, the slowdown in corporate profits. We had a yield curve inversion. So last year, the heavy lifting was done by PE ratios, which went up despite all this uncertainty. So, as we look ahead to 2020, because you always want to drive looking out the front mirror, not the back mirror. Looking ahead to 2020, we're moderately constructive. We're looking for mid-single-digit EPS growth, low inflation. The Fed's likely to remain on hold. And the big key is if we get a gradual improvement in corporate profits and some improvement in the global economy. So that's sort of our picture. In terms of overall asset allocation, there are several sectors that we like and a few that we dislike. But overall, we remain moderately constructive. Again, the heavy lifting will be not from PE ratios, more likely from earnings per share as we head through the year.
And what do you like when it comes to sectors, Michael?
Well, in terms of our portfolios, it's important to remain diversified. On the growth side, we like technology. We think you have to have some growth in your portfolio. So there are some exciting things like 5G and artificial intelligence and cloud computing, big data. On the value side, we like financial stocks, which we think are the cheapest part of the market right now. They're also buying back a lot of stock, and you have dividend growth. We like the healthcare sector. That's sort of our GARP, or growth at a reasonable price part of the market. And we also like industrials because we think there's going to be some gradual improvement in the global economy. And then within industrials, we also have a little bit of exposure to aerospace and defense through an ETF that we own.
So I do wonder, on a day like this, we've got a ton of Boeing news, and we've been talking about here, and the stock did rally a bit. It's off its highs as the overall market has pulled back a little bit. Is that a name that you're finding interest, that you think, all of the woes that have kind of pushed the stock down, it's worth looking at if you're an investor?
Well, unfortunately, we're not allowed to mention individual stocks, but I would say in terms of a lot of this, you have to look through the daily noise, whether it's trade, whether it's commentary on an individual stock, whether it's tweets from the Fed, tweets from Trump. You have to look through the noise and try and focus on the fundamentals. So what's interesting is we have a bifurcated economy, and by bifurcated, I mean that the ISM manufacturing for an index, for example, remains below 50, indicating contraction, while the ISM services index recently rose from 53.9 up to 55. So the consumer's on pretty healthy footing right now. Their savings rates are solid. Household balance sheets are okay. Job growth continues, although it's slowed a little bit. Wages are rising, although not great. So overall, the economy is doing reasonably well, supported by the consumer. And the key question in 2020 will really be, when does manufacturing start to improve?
And what are you seeing in that regard as you look at sectors and names that you guys do follow in terms of when that may turn, Michael?
Well, that's a big question going into 2020. We're looking overseas. For the past several years, we've been overweight the U.S. versus foreign, and we're still that way, but we're starting to take a closer look at foreign markets. So we're looking at things like business sentiment in Germany. Chinese exports today were a little bit better. We're watching the performance of semiconductor stocks, which are usually a leading index. And those are some of the things which are starting to turn a little more positive. It'll be important to watch the talks in Washington tomorrow, because we have a phase one trade deal, and nobody really knows exactly what's going to be included in that. But the important thing is that there's now a de-escalation of the trade and tariff problems between the U.S. and China, and that could start to improve business sentiment and start to turn CapEx and business spending a little more positive next year. So that at least the pieces are starting to fall into place, but we'll see how they play out.
And even though the U.S. is not going to cut more China tariffs until after that November vote, you still contend that it's a de-escalation. Just got about 20 seconds here.
Yeah, I still think that's a step in the right direction. Both sides need to work together. It's a big global economy, but I think at least the two sides are moving in the right direction.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Michael Sheldon, Executive Director, Chief Investment Officer for RDM Financial Group, joining us on the phone from Westport, Connecticut. And Carol, just as I take a look at what's the most read on the Bloomberg here on a very busy news day, it feels like. I mean, bank earnings obviously caught everybody's attention, but I did want to talk briefly because our audience does care so much about economic indicators. We know that Bloomberg exclusive saying the U.S. seeking the biggest change to economic data releases in decades, essentially removing computers potentially from media lockups. And lockups, it sounds a little wonky, but these are really important to us. And Bloomberg has been among those that's really pressed for access to this, to essentially get the information, distill it down, and then release stories at the time the data are released.
Well, this is what the Trump administration is looking to do, is to restrict the news media's ability to prepare advanced stories. And that has become the norm, not just by all news organizations, is you have the news, you've got the story all set to go, that as soon as it is made public, you send the story out. So I do wonder about what that means in terms of data flow, market interpretation. We don't get it instantaneously. And I do wonder if that does give maybe certain folks an advantage when it comes to trading on that news.
Well, that's going to be the question, because the investors are going to have to rely on the websites of the government, and so does the government have the ability to really host all of that? And if you read Flash Boys and other books like that, like people are constantly looking for those milliseconds of advantage. So we'll see how all that plays out. But not surprisingly, one of the most read stories right now on the Bloomberg. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
How should investors be positioning?
We go there.
Let's talk about export numbers, because they've been quite shocking. Korea, we saw Singapore, Japan too.
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. A Chinese property magnate is close to breaking London's house price record with the purchase of a 45-room mansion in Knightsbridge for more than $262 million. The private family office of Cheng Chong Q has agreed to buy the palatial home at 280.
Perry Bikers here. This message goes out to something very special.
Yes, we're talking to you, chicken.
Maybe we've been seeing too much of each other.
But times have changed, Dave.
We've been cheating on meat.
Thing is, no stocks make veggie dishes so irresistible that cheating on meat is proper tasty.
Our dear chicken, you were the fire in my life, but it's all about you now, aubergine katsu curry. Prepare to be wined and dined, my love.
Cheat on meat with no veggie stocks.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
There you have it, closing bell for this Tuesday, January 14th, 4 p.m. on Wall Street. And we're going to finish mixed right now with the Dow holding onto a very slim gain of about 0.1%. We're going to need a couple of moments to get accurate settlement for you on these numbers. We had some early session strength fade with some news on the U.S.-China trade situation. So we know that the signing of this Phase 1 deal is scheduled for tomorrow in Washington. And despite of the agreement, we're hearing the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will stay in place until after the election. We are told any move to reduce them will hinge on Beijing's compliance with terms of this Phase 1 accord. S&P 500, NASDAQ Composite, each weaker by roughly 0.2%, and they are down both from record highs. So the day began with earnings from both J.P. Morgan and Citigroup. Both banks beat estimates, and Citi shares powered ahead by 1.5%. J.P. Morgan up about 1.2% on the day. We also heard from Wells Fargo. What a disappointment there, and the stock fell by more than 5%. We have shares in FedEx benefiting from a Dow Jones news story indicating that Amazon has notified third-party merchants they can once again use FedEx Ground to ship orders placed under the Amazon Prime program. Amazon shares, though, today down about 1%. FedEx looks like it's going to pick up about 1.8% on the day. Shares in Boeing higher by more than 0.5%. The company, we are told, is talking to a group of banks about a potential loan. You know very well that Boeing has been dealing with a production halt tied to the grounding of the 737 MAX jetliner. We are told Citi is leading the discussions between Boeing and a small group of banks. We had a soft reading on core CPI today, up just 0.1% from levels in November relative to December. And we have a U.S. 10-year Treasury yield with 1.81%. The dollar right now stable with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index little changed on the day.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Stippy, you got to move.
And I'm moving on from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers, with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Time to take a look at some of the stocks on the move in the Tuesday trade. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly in our interactive broker studio. Jason, kind of an even split, 267 names higher today, 236 lower, 2 unchanged. But a lot of the names that have definitely caught our attention and we've been covering so far are the names that Doug has also talked about. But I think it's worth mentioning again. Certainly, let's take a look at those banks, because the big banks, of course, kicking off officially, unofficially, kicking off earnings season. J.P. Morgan, Citi, and Wells Fargo were on our radar today. And what's interesting
Two yays and one. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So JP Morgan, I love the headlines that we had on some of our stories. JP Morgan Chase just posted the best year for any U.S. bank in history, profit jumping 21% in the fourth quarter. Investors like what they had to hear about that. Citi, fixed income trading surges 49%. Our headline, Jenny Serrain, love it. Citigroup cutting traders, and it got its mojo back. Yeah. And that stock was up. But Wells Fargo bucking the higher trend in terms of stocks that we saw in Citi and JP Morgan. That stock under pressure. The bank's adjusted earnings per share missing estimates, and its results included $1.5 billion of litigation accruals for a variety of matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to sort of watch these names because, Wells Fargo continues to be sort of divergent from the others. Charlie Scharf, certainly a big job on his hands. Essentially, he's only been in the job for about a quarter officially. Yeah, to be fair to him. But it became clear today that there's maybe even more to fix than people thought. So
your number two decliner in the S&P, by the way, was Wells Fargo. But as we mentioned, JP Morgan and Citi rallying into
Beyond Meat.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it. China, obviously looking a little bit more and more possible, according to one interview with the executive chairman that made its way to investors today. So that stock grinding higher. See what I did there?
Oh, my God. It's like unbelievable what it's doing this year.
You didn't even appreciate my pun.
Yeah.
Grinding higher. You're ignoring it.
Some should be passed over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Those on YouTube, you saw a look just passed between us.
So stock was up
2.4%, and so far this year, Beyond Meat is already up 55%.
Isn't that nuts?
It's crazy. You know what else is up? And on an absolute tear? Tesla.
Yeah, there's another one, right? Yeah, so Tesla is up big time as well this year. In fact, the stock is now posting about almost a 29% gain, and that was helped out in part by another 2.5% gain in today's session. Just taking off, I love our story, the ludicrous mode, which is a mode within the car. I don't know if has your dad talked about the ludicrous mode?
He has not. He's talked so much about the Tesla, but we haven't talked about ludicrous mode yet.
So the stock up more than 25% this year, and what's interesting is all of a sudden you're seeing Wall Street analysts come out and they're like, oh wait, we got to raise our target, and that's kind of fascinating. I always love watching the rush.
$537, just shy of $538, and just 420, a distant memory.
Right. But you continue to see those some upbeat news, right? They had a surprise third quarter profit, strong deliveries for the fourth quarter. That Chinese plant, we had a story in the magazine. Yeah. I mean, phenomenal how quickly exactly, but it's his plant. It's Tesla-owned plant, which is not something you normally see often in China. It's often a partnership of some sorts. But he really kind of, as our story has said, kind of worked the officials, the leaders there, and got this done in kind of record time.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Pretty cool.
And you pointed this out earlier. The short interest is still 19% over at Tesla. Those guys are getting squeezed.
But if you really believe your short position, you're going to hold on to it because you think at some point it's going to fall off a cliff, and then hopefully you're made whole even better than that.
Do you want to mention Boeing? That was a name that did help drive the Dow today. That stock ending up about 0.7%. A lot of headlines. That
mixed
new
headlines
loan,
too.
Yeah, very mixed headlines. But it feels like the talks about that loan, that additional loan facility, may be giving investors some confidence that the finances are starting to come together.
A little bit of breathing room. The VIX, the volatility index report on this Tuesday, as stocks definitely finished way off their highs. The VIX moving up 1.1%. The VIX closing at 12.46. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who?
Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson back with us with your stock of the day. The symbol is ICHR. How do you pronounce that?
Ichor Holdings, I figure.
Right.
Anyway,
let's go with that.
Yeah, sure. The company is a supplier of components for chip production equipment, notably gas and chemical delivery systems. Most of the company's revenue comes from sales to two other equipment producers, Lam Research and Applied Materials. Now, Ichor was founded in 1999 and went public in December 2016. That ticker ICHR, as you mentioned, Jason. The company's shares have been up and down since their debut, mirroring swings in the semiconductor business. Yet they stayed above their initial price of $9, and today they jumped to a record. Revenue figures led to Ichor's surge. The company reported preliminary fourth quarter sales that beat analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. And it also provided a first quarter sales forecast that surpassed projections by an even wider margin. Now, they didn't go into detail about the numbers, and it's going to be a little bit more than 3 weeks before the company's fourth quarter results come out. Yet, the shares climbed as high as $39.83 in response. So there's your record. And it closed almost at the high of the day, $39.79. That's a gain of almost 29%. And that works out to be the stock's biggest ever advance.
Yeah, that's a big bump, man.
You are not kidding.
That's a big bump, man.
I'm just going to say, that's a big move up.
The chip business is back.
I know, right? Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Our Bloomberg Stocks columnist, Dave Wilson, with his stock of the day. So coming up,
we're going to head down to Atlanta. Visit with an old friend of ours, Grant Hill. Big news at the Atlanta Hawks. That's coming up next. But first, let's get to Bob Boone. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, the arguments for and against impeachment are still officially days away, but the battle to sway the case in the court of public opinion is already well underway. As the Democratic-led House prepares to transmit articles of impeachment to the Republican-led Senate tomorrow, Republican leader Mitch McConnell is already attacking the case before he's received it.
You really got to wonder what the definition of a fair trial is. They did almost nothing that you would expect the House to do in order to set up this case to be considered by the Senate.
As pressure mounts for McConnell to call fresh witnesses, he contends if the case is strong, there should be no need for additional testimony, and if the case is weak, House Democrats should not have impeached in the first place. The National Security Agency has discovered a big security flaw in the Windows 10 operating system that could let hackers intercept seemingly secure communications. Rather than exploit the flaw for itself, the NSA tipped off Microsoft so it can fix the system for everyone, and it's sending out a patch today. When reality television gets a little too intrusive, a Rhode Island woman has asked her hometown for $1 million to settle her complaint that the local police allowed the A&E TV show Live PD to record her wearing nothing but a towel. The complaint says police in East Providence had responded to her home after getting a 911 call from a child asking for help with homework and allowed the crew to film Desiree Spitaleri fresh from the shower last July. The city and network have declined comment. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Financial leaders enjoy talking with Tom Keene and Jonathan Darrow.
What was it like having the giant darken the door every once in a while?
Experts appreciate it when what they have to say is understood.
Do you think that we might have seen a cyclical peak in the labour market?
It's the same reason we're recommending Bloomberg Surveillance to you.
Everything you thought would happen is happening.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hard Megxit or soft Megxit? Have Harry and Meghan misjudged public feeling? And what does their departure mean for the future of the monarchy? With questions mounting, turn to The Telegraph for answers. Subscribe today at telegraph.co.uk.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Week continues.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It ended up being a mixed session for the equity market, with the S&P and the NASDAQ dropping from record highs. The Dow was positive, but off the best level of the day. The day began with some positive news on earnings, particularly from J.P. Morgan Chase, posting a 21% jump in profit. Those shares finished up about 1.2% today. We also heard from Citigroup reporting fixed income trading jumped 49%, helping to the bank report fourth quarter increase in profit of 15%. Citigroup shares today were up by about 1.5%. But midday, we got indications on the U.S.-China trade story. You know, this Phase 1 deal is expected to be signed tomorrow, and we're hearing that despite this agreement, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods are going to remain in place until after the election. We are told in order for those tariffs to be reduced, Beijing would have to comply with terms of the Phase 1 deal. Amazon shares were a little weak today. Dow Jones had reported earlier that Amazon has notified third-party merchants they can once again use FedEx Ground to ship orders under the Prime membership program. FedEx shares today were up 1.8%. In the bond market, meantime, U.S. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 1.81%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, also streaming live on YouTube. Well, we heard a lot about bank earnings today. JP Morgan Chase out with some nice numbers, but that's not the only news they're making today. Let's head down to Atlanta because Chase, of course, the consumer commercial banking business of JP Morgan, they did a deal with the Atlanta Hawks. Well, who better to talk about it than Grant Hill, co-owner, vice chair of the board, back with us. He joins us on the phone in the ATL. Grant, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Great to talk to you. We caught up with you, I believe, last year at the All-Star Game. A lot has happened since then, including this deal that you announced with Chase. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, thank you. We are so excited with the Atlanta Hawks. We have a new partnership with Chase Bank, and basically Chase is committed to really coming in and improving the lives, if you will, of those in Atlanta. I've always thought Atlanta was a sort of the city of opportunity, and if you have your stuff together, you're smart, and you're willing to work hard, that you can achieve. And certainly there's loads of examples of that, but not everyone certainly has the resources, the experience, the relationships to take advantage of those. And so Chase is coming in and really willing to serve, to educate, and to empower underserved communities here in Atlanta, and really just financial education of all Atlantans. And so, working with the Hawks on this, we're excited because it aligns with our goals in terms of being a civic asset and doing good for the community.
Right.
Also, of course, Chase is is willing to provide capital for small businesses, and we know that's the life force of any economy. So we're ecstatic here in Atlanta, and we had our kickoff today, had a Chase chat, myself along with legend Dominique Wilkins and some folks from Chase Bank. And so it was just a great day, a great partnership, a unique partnership. It's more than just aligning themselves with our brand, but really getting into the community and making an impact.
Well, and this is what I love about it, because I do think there needs to be more private companies, private institutions kind of getting at what ails us, Grant, as a society. And there's a lot of inequalities. And even though we daily, or weekly talk about the growth in Atlanta and people, all the companies that are there and so on and so forth, there are many that are still left behind. And it sounds like this is what this partnership, this Cornerstone partnership, gets at.
It really does. It really does. And, we can look in Atlanta, obviously, like I said, and there are people from all ethnicities, all walks of life who are really thriving, but there are those who aren't. And I think Chase recognizes that it's an opportunity to affect change. There was an article, and you guys probably know better than me. It was an article just came out, and obviously was addressing the low unemployment numbers that exist. But it was a little bit misleading, and the article, I can't remember where I read it, but it was talking about a number of the jobs that are out there. A high percentage are really low wage paying jobs, and so people who are working and certainly at or just below the poverty line. So they have jobs, but not really having access to real opportunities. So at least in our city and in our market in Atlanta, really trying to target that particular individual and give them the access, the resources, the education that's necessary. This stuff is not really taught in school. You don't learn this in high school. You don't, and so it's just an exciting day for the Atlanta Hawks, obviously for Chase Bank, but for the city of Atlanta.
So, Grant, keep me honest here. I believe Chase is also getting involved in a big annual game that you guys put on every Martin Luther King Day. Obviously, MLK Jr., an iconic figure everywhere, but certainly there in his hometown of Atlanta. Tell us about that game and what you're aiming to do with the Advancing Black Pathways Initiative.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and obviously, the birthplace of Dr. King and Atlanta, we are thankful to be able to have a game every year on MLK Day and really celebrate his legacy and all that he has been able to accomplish during his lifetime, and certainly since he was since assassinated. And we love that Chase Bank is committed to obviously helping people of color and to really kind of help us make that experience on MLK Day a fantastic experience. To have our customers come to games, obviously be entertained by the play on the court, But some of the programs that we provide pregame, halftime, even postgame, and really just reinforcing the message of this Pathways Initiative and this activation. And look, we're here. We want to help. We want to be in a position where we can provide opportunities. And so I really applaud Chase for their efforts. And we're beyond thrilled.
All right. Well, it's great to catch up with you. Come see us in New York. We'll come see you in Atlanta. Grant Hill, co-owner, vice chair of the board, an NBA legend, to say the least. There with the Atlanta Hawks, joining us on the phone from Atlanta. And a big deal that they're doing with Chase. A lot of important work going on down there in the ATL, my hometown.
I think it's, companies increasingly thinking about the communities that they, work within all around the country and what they can do to make a difference. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about that trade headline we got earlier.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks ended mixed following reports that the signing of the Phase 1 U.S.-China trade deal won't bring an immediate end to U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 33. The S&P 500 lost 5. The Nasdaq Composite tumbled 23. It was a bad day for Boeing as it lost its title as the world's largest aircraft maker. Boeing delivered less than half as many planes as did Airbus during 2019. It's just the latest fallout from the ongoing grounding of Boeing's 737 MAX. France is finalizing legislation to force Netflix and other video-on-demand services to invest at least 25% of their French revenue in local productions. Netflix has already made several French original series and plans to open a Paris office. One of the most powerful women at Uber is leaving the company to start a venture capital firm called Construct Capital. Rachel Holt was one of Uber's first employees. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
On the goal line, Martin scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, faced up.
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown. Again.
Search NFL today.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So the news on China and the U.S.-China trade agreement, I feel like every day this week we've gotten a little something, including today, and this has to do with tariffs on a lot of Chinese goods. They're going to stay in place until after the elections.
This is never a straight line, even though we have this phase one deal set to be signed tomorrow. We've got a senior delegation from China here. This is not over. We're going to get into this in just a minute. But first, let's get back to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on what's going on after the close. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Jason. Well, that news that you guys speak of broke midday, and the details really have to do with the two sides having an understanding that no sooner than 10 months after the signing of this phase one deal, which is expected tomorrow, the U.S. will review and potentially trim tariffs now in place on about $360 billion worth of Chinese goods. So this is essentially under the umbrella of enforcement and whether or not Beijing is compliant with the phase one accord. That news, as I mentioned, helped to take the equity market off session highs. We had a lot of positivity early on, thanks to very good earnings from both J.P. Morgan and Citigroup. J.P. Morgan shares today rising 1.6%. Citi shares were up about 1.3%. Disappointment, though, for Wells Fargo. Those numbers came in on the short side of forecast. Stock was down today by about 5%. Earnings from Delta Airlines helped shares fly ahead by more than 3% today. Delta last quoted at $6.45. In the bond market, meantime, U.S. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York down about 3.5 basis points in yield. We had a soft reading on core CPI, that's retail inflation ex food and energy. 10-year Treasury last quoted at a yield of 1.81%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, streaming live as well on YouTube. But let's move into a conversation about U.S.-China trade. been talking about this for quite some time. Tomorrow feels like, and should be, a seminal day, at least rhetorically and in the narrative of the relationship between the U.S. and China. But it's never easy. Today, news via Bloomberg that those tariffs are going to hang on probably through the election.
All right, so we're following U.S.-China trade. Ray Zhang is as well program associate at Wilson Center's Kissinger Institute on China and the United States, back with us and joining us once again on the phone from the nation's capital. Ray, good to have you here. Interesting day in terms of an interesting week as we lead up to the expected signing of Phase 1 between the U.S. and China. How does this week, in terms of how it's playing out, what does it say to you?
Well, to me, it says that the pending Phase 1 signing buys some time for China and the United States, but I wouldn't say that this is an indefinite reprieve from policy pressures on trade or pressure to get movement on other asks that each side has for the other. I would say that it's definitely an opportunity, but one that doesn't envision a clear-cut off-ramp for quite some time. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of the big asks were put on hold until after the U.S. 2020 presidential elections. And I would say for China, this means that aside from tariffs or higher policy scrutiny implemented on a really ad hoc or random basis, then it's bought itself some time for 2020.
And what do you make of sort of that strategy, Ray? I mean, sort of buying time. Politically, it certainly makes sense. It feels like from the U.S. side. What's the China side of this?
Well, the China side from this, if you think about it from what they've observed coming out of Washington, Trump's political calculus on China has waxed and waned in accordance with how fruitful trade negotiations have gone. And now that it's in a bit of a holding pattern for some time, there's a little bit of leverage from the U.S. side that's taken off the table. The Phase 1 negotiations, for example, coincided with the still ongoing situation in Hong Kong, as well as the January 2020 Taiwan elections. But what we've observed coming out of China is a relatively subdued response. Now that trade negotiations have sort of fallen back, they might take a different tack to both of these policy areas, as well as other potentially contentious issues going forward. At least this is something that's likely to happen from the Chinese side.
All right, so maybe a moment of calm here. What will be the next issues that they've got to take off or are expected to take up after we get through this?
I think that China is going to expect opportunities to build stable trade consensus with the United States. So essentially, a better timetable for policy that might be implemented or tariffs that might be levied. For the United States, the question that's been consistently asked by firms has been sort of more protection for the United States service and technological industries operating in China. That's something that wasn't resolved in this round. And I think for both China and the United States, they're looking to move beyond the question of agricultural businesses. That's been an easy issue to resolve. Other trade and economic issues are far thornier.
And Ray, talk to us about the rest of the world briefly. You know, how does the rest of the world look at this? Obviously, there are geopolitical concerns for China and for the U.S. that aren't limited to each other, as it were.
Well, China has always, for the last couple of years, has had some pull because of its market, and it's certainly used its purchasing power to impact its economic relations with South America. It's always had pull as a big trading partner for Southeast Asia, and the trend for the last couple of years is as China's economic engagement has ramped up, it's also tried to position itself as a more prominent policy influencer, especially as it perceives America to be weakening in international policy spaces.
Right.
So during the course of this trade war, China has shifted some of its markets out of the United States. Likewise, we've seen firms that are U.S.-owned or are major trading partners with the U.S. start to look at manufacturing facilities outside of China. But moving manufacturing facilities is always an expensive move, and not all firms are able to make that choice right away.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Ray Xiong is Program Associate at Wilson Center's Kissinger Institute on China and the U.S., joining us on the phone from Washington, D.C. Obviously, a lot more to come as the week goes on, Carol, related to trade, U.S., China, and maybe even a little USMCA, USMCA,
exactly.
as you call it.
So we'll track that. All right, right now, let's see what's going on when it comes to world and national news headlines. Back over to Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. Senate Republicans agree to aim for 1 week from today to start the impeachment trial of President Trump, with the Chief Justice set to swear in the senators as jurors later this week. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the agreement on procedure was unanimous.
All 53 of us would set up the arguments by the prosecutors and the defense, and then a written question period, and then after that, the more contentious issue of witnesses. Our members feel that we have an obligation to listen to the arguments, not dismiss the case.
At least 4 Republicans have favored a vote on calling witnesses. If Democrats get their wish, Republicans, McConnell said, also have a wish list. On Capitol Hill, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
It seems the defense secretary may be tired of being on the defensive over the Trump administration's actions in Iran. One of the questions reporters had today, while President Trump claimed he authorized the strike against Iran's top general because he was plotting an imminent attack on Americans, why did he authorize Qasem Soleimani's killing 7 months ago?